In a pitch-black cave, Fang Hao jolted awake to the burning agony of a barbed whip lashing across his back. He was a low-level farmer being forced at weapon point by a cruel lord to scout a dangerous cavern. Just as despair set in, a sudden system announcement echoed in his mind. Welcome to the Global Lord's game. Recruit farmers, gather resources, and expand your territory to survive. You have 7 days of newbie protection. Treat your units well or face desertion. Fang Hao quickly realized his grim reality. He was mere cannon fodder. Deeper in the cave, he and 4 trembling farmers discovered the threat, a massive, crimson-eyed demon-spotted tiger. Though heavily wounded and bleeding profusely, the beast lunged at them in a desperate fury. Fight it or we all die, Fang Hao roared, swinging his stone axe. Minutes later, a blood-soaked Fang Hao emerged alone. He signaled the lord, who greedily sprinted past him into the cave to claim a hidden treasure chest. But as the lord stared in confusion at the already open chest, Fang Hao struck from the shadows. With 2 brutal swings of his axe, the tyrant's head rolled. Immediately, a new system notification flashed. Data correction compensation granted, hundredfold amplification. Faction assignment due to a sin value of 500, you are assigned to the evil undead faction. Fang Hao claimed the leather-bound lord's book from the corpse. Thanks to his undead alignment, his unlocked level 1 farmhouse blueprint instantly morphed into a level 1 graveyard. He opened the global chat channel to gauge his competition. It was flooded with absolute panic. Lords worldwide were trapped in their bases, terrified to step outside, and losing their starting units to giant pythons and colossal wild boars. The world was a death trap. Closing the book, Fang Hao turned back to the tiger's carcass and activated his newly acquired lord abilities. System butchering complete. Obtain 600 meat, 45 beast hide, and 25 beast bone. Fang Hao was no longer a slave. He was a lord of the undead, and his game of survival had just begun. Instead of manual labor, a beam of light enveloped the tiger's carcass. In seconds, the decomposition was complete, cleanly separating the meat, fur, and bones before the remaining skeleton crumbled into fine dust. Beneath it lay the hidden spoils of the treasure chest, a level 1 warehouse blueprint, and 5 coils of hemp rope. Securing the loot, Fang Hao sprinted back toward his territory, desperate to reach the safety of the 7-day newbie protection barrier. He arrived at a crude straw dwelling, officially recognized by the system as his level 1 lord's wooden house. Nearby sat his core territory building, the level 1 underground tomb. While other players on the global chat debated managing their living, breathing farmers, Fang Hao's only recruitment option was entirely free skeletons. He initiated the summon for his initial cap of 5 units. Instantly, the system flashed. Hundredfold amplification triggered, successfully recruited 505 skeletons. A massive army of snow-white Tier 1 skeleton laborers burst from the dirt, packing the territory to the absolute brim. Because they were undead, they possessed no morale, felt no exhaustion, and required absolutely zero food. They were the ultimate tireless workforce. Fang Hao ordered them out to gather resources, but leaving them to punch trees with bare hands was inefficient. He opened his crafting menu to forge tools. Using 2 pieces of straw, he crafted a single hemp rope. Hundredfold amplification triggered, successfully crafted 101 hemp ropes. Realizing the amplification applied to crafting as well, he rapidly manufactured tools. Spending minimal resources, he instantly generated a massive mountain of 202 stone axes and 303 stone pickaxes. The skeletons armed themselves and marched out into the wilderness like clockwork. Shortly after, a small detachment returned. They were missing limbs and covered in dirt, but they dragged the carcass of a Tier 1 one-horned goat. They dropped the prey and mutely turned back to work without requiring a single moment of rest. Fang Hao activated his butcher ability on the goat, instantly yielding 500 meat, 20 beast hide, and 15 beast bone. While the rest of the world struggled with complaining, exhausted human workers, Fang Hao sat back and smiled. He had an endless, sleepless workforce, and his empire was growing by the minute. With over 500 skeletons working tirelessly, basic resources piled into small mountains, leaving Fang Hao with nowhere to step. To clear the clutter, he used a single piece of straw to craft hemp rope, triggering the hundredfold amplification to gain 101 lengths. He then spent the materials to construct a level 1 warehouse. A wooden-framed, straw-roof structure materialized, and his mindless workforce immediately began storing resources neatly inside. Capitalizing on this terrifying collection speed, Fang Hao gathered enough wood, stone, straw, and hemp rope to instantly upgrade his main base to a level 2 Lord's wooden house. Suddenly, a massive crimson system alert echoed across the globe. World announcement: congratulations to Lord Fang Hao for being the first in the world to upgrade their main city. The global chat exploded into a frenzy of shock, envy, and accusations of cheating. While other lords were desperately boiling wild weeds to restore their human workers' stamina, Fang Hao was already reaping exclusive world-first rewards. Passive skill: bone manipulation technique, grants skeleton mobility and attribute buffs. Green blueprint: double-hand light crossbow. Purple special blueprint: rejuvenation spring. Determined to widen the gap, Fang Hao immediately upgraded his underground tomb to level 2, doubling his recruitment limit. He summoned another batch of 5 base skeletons, which instantly triggered the hundredfold amplification, bringing an additional 505 skeletons into his army. He quickly mass-crafted another mountain of stone weapons, but just as he was about to distribute them, a ferocious pack of prairie wolves ambushed his outer workers. The wild beasts tore through the isolated skeletons, scattering white bones across the dirt. Fang Hao's eyes narrowed. These beasts have the nerve to bully the undead, he snarled. He ordered a counterattack. Free from fear or morale penalties, nearly 100 nearby skeletons swarmed the wolves, relentlessly hacking away with stone axes. Overwhelmed by sheer numbers, the pack scattered, leaving 6 dead wolves behind. Fang Hao butchered the carcasses, yielding a massive haul of 2,400 meat, 120 animal hide, and 90 beast bone. However, looking at his fractured, broken units, Fang Hao realized that sitting back was no longer an option. The surrounding wilderness was far too dangerous. Armed with a stone axe and flanked by a massive horde of over 900 silent white-boned soldiers, Fang Hao marched out into the wild to hunt the pack down. Tracking the wounded wolves, Fang Hao and his massive undead legion reached a vast grassland. Over 20 prairie wolves lazily basked outside a dark, ominous cave. Surround them, Fang Hao commanded, leave none alive. The skeleton army charged, lacking tactical nuance but boasting a massive numbers advantage. The tide of 900 bones completely overwhelmed the pack. Within seconds, the wolves were hacked to pieces. Suddenly, a pair of ghostly green eyes lit up inside the cave. A massive Tier 2 prairie wolf king emerged with a deafening roar, but as it locked eyes with the towering wall of undead, its roar abruptly cut short. The ruthless horde flooded the cavern. Minutes later, they emerged dragging the Wolf King's carcass alongside a wooden treasure chest. Inside, Fang Hao discovered a Tier 1 barracks blueprint, burial ground, and a common wooden shield blueprint. Returning to base, he butchered the corpses, yielding a staggering 10,400 meat, 530 beast hide, and 400 beast bone. With his warehouse overflowing with meat, it was time to build. He spent his resources to construct the burial ground barracks. To summon the new units, the building required 300 beast bones. Fang Hao initiated recruitment, instantly triggering his perk. Hundredfold amplification triggered, successfully recruited 101 skeleton soldiers. Sturdier than laborers and sporting tattered cloth shirts, these Tier 1 combat units unlocked the shield bash skill, but they required actual shields. Fang Hao opened his manufacturing page and crafted a single wooden shield. Hundredfold amplification triggered, successfully crafted 101 wooden shields. Equipping his new army with axes and shields, he ordered them to patrol the territory boundaries, securing his laborers from further wildlife disruptions. As night fell, Fang Hao finally sat by a campfire, roasting wolf meat. Hungry and bored, he opened the global chat. The channel was pure chaos. Players worldwide were starving, terrified to leave their bases, and watching their human workers' loyalty plummet to dangerous lows. Seizing the opportunity, Fang Hao utilized the trading feature. Seller Fang Hao. Item 1000 units of meat. Price per unit 50 wood, 40 stone, or 5 iron ore. The chat instantly exploded. While the rest of humanity was on the brink of starvation, Fang Hao had officially become the world's first apocalyptic tycoon. The initial 1,000 units of meat vanished in under 2 minutes, leaving Fang Hao's private chat flooded with desperate players offering anything, even private photos, for food. Recognizing the global scarcity, Fang Hao listed another 500 units. The world channel went wild. While others slowly mined wood and traded readily available water, actual meat was non-existent. His second batch sold out instantly. From these two transactions alone, Fang Hao amassed a staggering 60,000 wood, 11,920 stone, and 20 iron. The colossal influx of materials completely packed his territory, leaving on lay a tiny path to walk on. Amidst the chaos, a player desperate for food private messaged him a simple leather armor blueprint, white. Refusing to exploit their desperation, Fang Hao generously traded 50 units of meat for it. After finishing his dinner, he immediately tested the recipe. Hundredfold amplification triggered, successfully crafted 101 pieces of leather armor. He kept one for himself and equipped his skeleton soldiers. Clad in leather armor and wooden shields, the pale undead horde finally looked like a legitimate military force. The next morning, Fang Hao woke up sore from sleeping on straw. Outside, his tireless labor skeletons were still mining like clockwork. Over a breakfast of roasted meat, he threw another 2,000 units of meat onto the market, which triggered another instantaneous buying frenzy. His name was now firmly cemented as the ultimate tycoon of the new world. With resources overflowing, it was time to upgrade. He expended materials to instantly morph his crude thatched shed into a spacious, durable Level 2 warehouse, expanding his storage capacity to 30,000 units and slowing food spoilage. To push it to Level 3, however, he first needed to upgrade his main lord's house. Just as he was planning his next move, a private message pinged from a player named Dong Jiayu. She wanted to trade a rare, special mineral for food. Fang Hao opened the item description and his eyes lit up. Shadowstone rare ore required for the construction of undead faction buildings. It was the exact bottleneck resource he needed to advance his empire. His undead army was about to get a massive upgrade. Playing it cool, Fang Hao successfully downplayed his interest in the rare Shadowstone during his chat with Dong Jiayu. Since Shadowstones were useless to her human faction, she gladly traded it for 30 units of meat, revealing she had salvaged it from a nearby ancient tomb. With his first Shadowstone secured and his relentless skeleton labor force amassing materials, Fang Hao upgraded his main base to Level 3 Lord's Wooden House, expanding his town hall into a highly refined and sturdy structure. Next-level upgrades would now require a new material, stone bricks. He then funneled his remaining wood and leather into upgrading his storage, resulting in a Level 3 warehouse with a massive 50,000 unit capacity. Yet his terrifying resource generation still left materials overflowing onto the open ground. Realizing he needed to map the surrounding wilderness to secure more resources, Fang Hao gathered his fully equipped combat units. "Follow me out," he ordered. "Your mission is to protect me." Armed with stone axes and wooden shields, his silent army marched past the protective barrier. They tracked a nearby freshwater stream where Fang Hao suddenly stopped, his eyes locking onto deep, fresh wheel ruts in the soft mud. A new neighbor had arrived. Intrigued but cautious, he trailed the marks until he spotted a traveling caravan. The owners were hunched, gray-skinned humanoid creatures with distinct canine heads, transport carts filled with bloody carcasses. System Kobold Slinger Tier 2, Skill Sling. The group of 20 kobolds immediately spotted the undead. Letting out piercing howls, they whirled their stone slings, launching a barrage of projectiles that slammed violently against the skeleton's wooden shields. "Attack, kill them," Fang Hao roared. The lopsided battle was over in a flash. Charging behind their shields and leather armor, the massive army of hundreds of skeleton soldiers completely closed the distance, shrugging off the ranged assault. The kobold's short daggers were utterly useless against the overwhelming bone tide. Under a flurry of brutal shield bashes and chaotic axe strikes, the entire pack was wiped out. As the skeletons secured the dropped loot, Fang Hao noticed a strange, biological vertebrae manifesting beside the kobold corpses. Wriggling spine, a sacrificial item for the undead race, used for recruiting undead troop types. Fang Hao smiled. His exploration was already yielding the dark materials needed to fuel his growing empire. Fang Hao immediately recognized the value of the wriggling spine. Much like the human faction's rare soul crystals, these spines were the true primary recruitment material for the undead. While his previous summon used beast bones as a temporary substitute, a single spine was vastly more potent, carrying the recruitment weight of 300 normal bones. From the slaughtered kobolds, his soldiers harvested an impressive haul: 21 iron daggers, 8 wriggling spines, a flatbed cart, and 3 animal carcasses. Testing the drop rate, he realized only a fraction of the enemy's yielded spines. Fang Hao examined an acquired weapon. Iron Dagger White, Tier 1 damage. Description: sticking iron onto a wooden handle. What kind of brain came up with this? Though poorly crafted, these daggers dealt true Tier 1 damage, vastly outclassing his lumber-focused stone axes. He immediately equipped 20 uninjured soldiers with the iron blades. Rather than waiting to be ambushed, Feng Hao chose a proactive strike. Following the fresh cart ruts deep into the forest, he discovered a heavily fortified kobold stronghold complete with log walls and a towering sentry post. He quietly observed their operations. They had a functional society of 500 to 600 individuals, including advanced classes like cobbled warriors with iron sabers and cobbled braves with massive axes. Even worse, their returning carts carried human corpses. "Let's head back," Feng Hao whispered, leading a silent retreat. He absolutely intended to exterminate this camp, but he needed to scale up his numbers first. Returning to base at noon, he butchered the harvested game for 1,200 meat, 90 beast hide, and 60 beast bone. He then marched straight to the burial ground. Feeding his 8 newly acquired wriggling spines into the interface, the system flared. Hundredfold amplification triggered. Successfully recruited 808 skeleton soldiers. A massive wave of 808 heavy combat units burst from the soil, packing the camp. Feng Hao mass-crafted matching shields and axes, assigning his vast new army to transport resources and hunt. As a lunch of finely sliced dagger-cut meat roasted over the campfire, he opened the global chat. The channel was in absolute despair. Players were begging for weapons, fleeing roaming undead, and starving. Smiling, Feng Hao listed 2,000 units of meat onto the market. The chat instantly froze in shock before erupting into a synchronized chorus of awe. The undisputed king of the undead was pulling further ahead. The massive influx of resources from the meat trade transformed Feng Hao's territory into a sprawling landscape of supply mountains. Amidst the chaos, a private message pinged from Dong Jiayu. She had unearthed 2 more shadow stones from the ancient tomb. Recognizing their value as exclusive undead faction currency, Feng Hao gladly bought them for 60 units of meat, a trade that left both parties highly satisfied. Armed with the necessary minerals, Feng Hao rushed to his level 2 underground tomb and initiated an upgrade. The structure pulsed with dark energy, morphing into a level 3 tomb and expanding his recruitment limit to 20. He immediately clicked recruit for the remaining 10 slots. Hundredfold amplification triggered. Successfully recruited 1,010 skeletons. A colossal wave of over 1,000 labor units burst from the soil. Feng Hao rapidly utilized his amplification trait to mass manufacture equipment, generating 3,030 pieces of simple leather armor and 2,020 wooden shields. He fully equipped his entire force, comprising roughly 2,000 laborers and 900 heavily armed soldiers. Standing atop a massive boulder, Feng Hao looked over the sprawling, silent sea of bone. He raised his arm and gave a rousing, dramatic speech about reclaiming the dignity of the undead against the kobolds. Yet, the skeletons just stared back blankly like terracotta warriors. "Fine," Feng Hao muttered, jumping down. "You're going to give me depression eventually." Living with mute skeletons on day 2 was already turning him into an introverted undead himself. "Move out." The massive legion marched, surrounding Feng Hao in a protective vanguard. Upon approaching the fortified kobold camp, Feng Hao ordered his army to half-crouch through the bushes. Lacking ranged units, he needed to minimize the distance before the assault to mitigate casualties. The rustling of the dense foliage quickly alerted the outer woodcutting kobolds. Realizing his cover was blown, Feng Hao unleashed his horde. "Go, attack the camp." A warning horn blared from the watchtowers as the kobolds desperately slammed the village gates shut, sacrificing their own scouts outside. Kobold slingers lined the high log walls, unleashing a lethal barrage of projectiles. Stones cracked ribs and fractured limbs, but the lopsided bone tide was unstoppable. Reaching the foot of the 3-meter defensive wall, the fearless skeletons began stacking themselves like a living ladder. Watching them scale the barricade in a terrifying swarm, Feng Hao was instantly reminded of the cataclysmic wall-climbing scene from World War Z. The siege of the kobold stronghold had begun. Against a fearless, overwhelming undead tide, the kobolds stood absolutely no chance. The skeletons utilized a human pyramid to breach the log walls while the front gates splintered under a flurry of relentless axe strikes. The bone army flooded the camp, completely submerging the defenders in a brutal melee. When the dust finally settled, every single kobold had been hacked to a pulp. Feng Hao walked into the silent camp and issued a simple command: clean up the battlefield, collect all equipment and resources. While his units scavenged the yard, Fang Hao led a vanguard into the chief's large wooden council hall, eager to replace the rough straw bedding at his base. He ordered the furniture cleared. Behind the main hall lay the chief's bedroom, containing a solid wood double bed with pristine fur blankets and a metallic high-grade chest. System Black Iron Treasure Chest opened. Obtained market blueprint, flatbed cart blueprint, iron axe blueprint, and 20 war coins. This single raid was an absolute jackpot. Returning to the courtyard, Fang Hao took inventory of the staggering haul. Resources: 122 wriggling spines, 5,520 wood, 3,220 stone, 47 iron, 3,225 meat, and 144 beast hide. Equipment and furniture: hundreds of weapons, a massive iron cooking pot, a complete dining set, and the coveted double bed. Though the siege had cost Fang Hao a third of his forces, his labor skeletons were free to summon, and his 122 new wriggling spines meant he could instantly amplify a massive replacement army. To transport the mountain of loot, the captured vehicles weren't enough. Fang Hao opened his production tab and crafted a single flatbed cart. Hundredfold amplification triggered, successfully produced 101 flatbed carts. As the skeletons loaded the caravan, Fang Hao realized this fortified camp would make a perfect secondary gathering outpost for his tireless, foodless workers. Securing the perimeter, the massive convoy began its journey back along the main road. Fang Hao lay comfortably on a cart, leaning against his newly acquired furs, and opened the global chat to pass the time. The channel was currently melting down over a bizarre incident. A terrified player reported pulling up a river fishing net, only to find it entirely jammed with walking skeleton bones tightly clutching stone axes. Fang Hao read the text and smiled quietly. His unstoppable empire was expanding into the world, and there was nowhere left to hide. Reading the global chat, Fang Hao deduced that the player complaining about a bone-filled fishing net, Zhang Bin, was his neighbor. The skeletons washed away in the stream during the kobold raid had drifted right into Zhang Bin's net. Back at base, the looted caravan supplies automatically sorted themselves into the warehouse. Fang Hao had his skeletons move his hard-earned double bed into his wooden house, sending the fur blankets to the river for a thorough wash. Next, he brought up his newly acquired iron axe blueprint. It required 2 iron and 2 wood. With 59 iron in his reserves, he initiated the craft. Hundredfold amplification triggered. Successfully manufactured 808 iron axes and 505 stone pickaxes. With over 1,400 labor skeletons active, Fang Hao tactically optimized his workforce. He assigned 900 to quarrying stone and 500 to logging with the new iron axes, which replaced their fragile stone tools. He also deployed 200 skeleton soldiers to push the flatbed carts, entirely automating resource transport and maximizing efficiency. Fang Hao aggressively threw his old straw bedding into the warehouse. He finally had a real bed. Turning to his blueprints, he spent his basic resources to build a level 1 marketplace. A 2-story wooden building with an enclosed yard materialized, followed immediately by a system prompt. Undead faction influence has reached 200. Do you accept the settlement of the merchant caravan, Bone King Odys? Accepting the request triggered a 12-hour countdown. Simultaneously, a grave mound emitting an eerie green light erupted in the marketplace yard. The caravan wasn't going to roll in, it was going to crawl out from the dirt. As night fell, Fang Hao roasted meat over the campfire, pointedly ignoring the massive iron pot he looted from the kobolds, knowing they used humans as ingredients. He opened the global channel to unwind. The chat was a wave of complaints about fragile stone tools breaking after a few swings. Suddenly, a player named Yao Liang posted an ad selling iron axes for 8 iron or 50 meat. The channel erupted, denouncing Yao Liang as a greedy scammer. Yao Liang fired back ruthlessly, "Buy it or don't, every second counts in this world." As Fang Hao watched the drama unfold, a private message suddenly popped up from none other than Yao Liang himself. "Fang Hao, you there?" Yao Liang's private message was bursting with unearned confidence. "Iron axes, 50 meat each, boosts gathering speed, how many do you want?" He clearly viewed Fang Hao as a wealthy sucker. Before Fang Hao could even text a refusal, Yao Liang publicly announced in the global chat that Fang Hao had already purchased a massive batch. The channel erupted, with players calling them greedy monopolists. Fang Hao refused to be anyone's marketing pawn. He instantly posted to the channel, "I am Fang Hao. I have never purchased, nor do I intend to purchase, this person's axes. Do not believe his lies." As the chat turned on the exposed scammer, a furious Yao Liang spammed his inbox with curses. Fang Hao calmly ignored the barking. Instead, he utilized his hundredfold amplification to forge 101 iron axes and listed them for just 4 iron each, cutting Yao Liang's price directly in half. The market broke completely, forcing a humiliated Yao Liang to issue massive refunds to his angry customers. Desperate players immediately began flooding Fang Hao with private offers, trading blueprints for his heavily discounted iron axes. In minutes, he acquired blueprints for a wooden barrel, wooden bench, drying rack, and a simple single bed. System blueprints recorded, hundredfold amplification triggered. He mass-produced 101 wooden barrels, sending his tireless skeletons to haul fresh river water. Even Dong Jiayu reached out, trading more rare shadow stones for 10 iron axes. After listing another 2,000 units of meat to maintain his market dominance, Fang Hao finally retired to his cabin, enjoying his first genuinely comfortable night of sleep on a real bed. The next morning marked his 3rd day in this unforgiving world. After putting his daily meat inventory on the market, he crafted a single drying rack, amplifying it into a massive yard of 101 drying racks. He ordered a skeleton laborer to begin hanging raw meat to cure, expanding his food preservation capabilities. Suddenly, a cold system notification echoed across the camp. "The skeletal caravan has arrived in your territory. The Lord may go and inspect it." Flanked by heavily armed skeleton soldiers for protection, Fang Hao marched to the marketplace. Sitting beside the newly opened tomb was a lavishly dressed skeleton merchant draped in fine robes, clutching a wooden cane and sporting a gleaming gemstone ring. As Fang Hao approached, the merchant's blue, firelit eye sockets flashed with brief surprise before it bowed low. "My lord," it rasped aloud, "Ruhr is willing to serve you." Fang Hao froze in absolute shock. The skeleton could speak. Bypassing his scientific confusion about how a fleshless neck could speak, Fang Hao welcomed the refined, aristocratic skeleton Ruhr. Ruhr tapped his cane, opening a dimly lit cemetery tunnel. A shelf of bone rose from the dirt, displaying 6 low-tier items tailored to Fang Hao's current level. 3 white blueprints, an iron sword, leather helmet, and metal parts, alongside a green organ jar, a blank map, and the active Lord skill Divine Descent Undead. The items required war coins. Combining his world-first upgrade reward with the spoils of the Kobold raid, Fang Hao realized he had exactly enough. "I want them all," he stated flatly. Ruhr bowed gracefully as the transaction completed. The blueprints and map instantly integrated into the Lord's book, unlocking a 5th tab, map, which currently showed his territory boundaries surrounded by a dense fog of war. He immediately consumed the skill book to learn Divine Descent, granting him the vital ability to possess and directly pilot his mindless undead soldiers in battle. Ruhr explained that the caravan would return in 7 days with refreshed inventory. When Fang Hao greedily asked about selling items, hoping to exploit his hundredfold amplification for infinite currency, Ruhr countered that he couldn't sell until his territory registered its own caravan. The merchant then sank back into the grave, leaving a 7-day cooldown timer. Left alone with his thoughts, Fang Hao marched to the burial ground to replenish his military might. He deposited his entire cache of 122 wriggling spines. System hundredfold amplification triggered. Successfully recruited 12,322 skeleton soldiers. In a blinding flash, a colossal legion of over 12,000 heavily armed combat units materialized, packing his territory to the absolute brim. Just as he was preparing to organize his massive new army, a private message pinged from Dong Jiayu. "Are you there? I want to discuss something." Instead of offering more shadow stones, her tone was urgent. "I've explored down to the 3rd level of the ancient tomb, and hostile undead creatures have appeared. I want to ask you for some iron axes in advance to use as weapons." Fang Hao's eyes narrowed. The wilderness was escalating, but with over 12,000 soldiers at his back, he was more than ready to negotiate. Dong Jiayu, a martial arts school prodigy from Earth, was thriving near a resource-rich mountain valley. Her early discovery of an ancient tomb fueled her territory's growth, allowing her to barter rare shadow stones to Fang Hao. However, a recent plunge into the tomb's 2nd layer unleashed a deadly horde of hostile undead, killing 2 of her militiamen and wounding her. Desperate to maintain her edge, she swallowed her pride and messaged Fang Hao, hoping to borrow some heavy-duty iron axes to use as weapons. "You want to borrow tools for combat?" Fang Hao messaged back, surprised. Learning she had only 3 human militiamen left, he didn't hesitate. "I can provide actual weapons and equipment. Just give me first priority on any future items you unearth." Since the system didn't support direct gifting, Dong Jiayu listed a single unit of wood on the market. In return, Fang Hao transferred single-edged iron swords and 4 sturdy wooden shields. Dong Jiayu stared at her screen in absolute shock. By day 3, Fang Hao was already mass-producing military-grade steel. To her, he had become an unfathomable powerhouse. With the transaction complete, Fang Hao reinvested his massive iron reserves. Utilizing his hundredfold amplification, he crafted a staggering arsenal: 13,130 iron swords, 13,130 wooden shields, and over 14,000 leather helmets. Once his massive army of 12,000 skeleton soldiers was fully armed, Fang Hao decided to test his new ability. He grabbed a nearby soldier and activated Divine Descent. His vision went dark. His human body collapsed onto the stone steps as his consciousness instantly transferred into the skeleton, its empty eye sockets igniting with ghostly blue fire. Testing his bizarre new vocal cords, he commanded 2 nearby guards, "Carry my body inside and put it on the bed." The brainless workers carelessly dumped his human shell onto the double bed. Safe within his newbie protection barrier, his main body was secure, making this proxy exploration entirely risk-free. Commandeering a detachment of 2,000 armed skeletons, Fang Hao marched out to map the surrounding fog of war. Meanwhile, back at the devastated Kobold camp, a furious clan chief sat on a rock. He had returned from trading at an orc market only to find his entire stronghold completely pillaged. "Chief, we traced the cart ruts," a scout panted. "We found a village of the dead. There are thousands of them." Realizing his current forces were vastly outnumbered, the chief's eyes burned with malice. "Go contact the Fireblade Orc tribe," he roared. "Tell them we found a rich village to plunder together." A massive storm was brewing, and Fang Hao's undead empire was directly in its path. Oblivious to the impending Kobold alliance, Fang Hao pushed further into the fog of war. Even while operating via Divine Descent, every location his proxy body discovered updated his master map perfectly. The 2-hour expedition was a resounding success, netting 5 ironhide boars and 3 unicorns. Pilot controlling the skeleton felt exactly like a risk-free virtual reality game. Suddenly, an earth-shattering roar echoed ahead. The ground trembled violently as a massive, red-furred Tier 3 jungle giant bear lunged from the thicket. Its heavy paw slammed directly into Fang Hao's wooden shield, launching his skeletal frame through the air and smashing him against a tree. Though 2 of his proxy ribs snapped, he felt zero pain and his mobility remained unimpaired. His 12,000-strong bone army immediately swarmed the beast, executing flawless shield bashes. Seizing a critical opening, Fang Hao lunged forward, driving his iron sword deep beneath the bear's tail to secure the kill. "Load it onto the cart," he rasped. If he had faced this monster in his human body, it would have been an absolute death sentence. Following the trail back to the bear's cave, Fang Hao discovered a tattered leather pack belonging to a long-dead traveler. Inside lay a single-page map, Dragon Burial Cave. Deeper within the cavern sat a wooden chest. Opening it, he claimed blueprints for a stone hoe, a bathtub, and a rare nature's gem. Returning triumphantly to base, Fang Hao deactivated his proxy state. Waking up in his double bed, he rubbed a massive bump on his human head, a souvenir from his clumsy skeleton guards bumping him into the doorframe earlier. Stepping outside, he processed the day's massive haul, yielding a staggering 4,900 meat, 215 hides, and 150 bones. He integrated the adventurer's map, which cleared a massive patch of fog far to the north, revealing a jagged mountain range labeled the Dragon Burial Cave. As dusk fell, Fang Hao immediately listed several thousand units of meat onto the global market to appease the anxious players flooding his inbox. In the blink of an eye, the inventory vanished. Suddenly, a private message pinged from the familiar trader who had previously sold him the leather armor. "Offer iron pot blueprint wood 6, stone 6, iron 3. Fang Hao smiled, thinking of the tainted kobold pot he had refused to use. "I'll give you 3 iron axes for it," he replied. The foundation for a truly civilized empire was finally coming together. Though a cast iron pot wasn't an essential item, Fang Hao couldn't shake the grim psychological burden of using the blood-stained one looted from the kobold camp. When a familiar trader offered an iron pot blueprint, Fang Hao gladly bought it for 3 iron axes. He even generously agreed to craft a free pot for the man using his own materials. To Fang Hao, materials were cheap, but blueprints were priceless. System blueprint recorded, hundredfold amplification triggered. In a flash of light, 101 iron pots, complete with built-in wooden stoves, materialized on the open ground. After sending one to the trader, Fang Hao listed the remaining 98 on the global market for 5 iron ore each. He then utilized his amplification to craft 101 bathtubs, treated himself to a piping hot shower, and went to sleep feeling thoroughly refreshed. The next morning, the global chat exploded with a bizarre rumor. Players were claiming that Fang Hao's pots were magical. Even a simple wild vegetable soup cooked in them inexplicably tasted like rich, oily meat broth. The inventory sold out instantly. Fang Hao chuckled quietly, realizing he had mixed the heavily seasoned kobold pots into the sales batch. Marking his 4th day, Fang Hao completed a quick morning workout before using Divine Descent to pilot a skeleton soldier. Leading a vanguard of 2,000 troops westward across a flat plain, he suddenly halted the march. Wandering ahead were 3 glowing, vine-wrapped humanoid entities. The Lost Wood Elemental Spirit Tier 3, Abilities Entanglement Revival. Attack, Fang Hao commanded. The massive bone horde charged. The spirits triggered their entanglement ability, causing massive pythons of thick vines to erupt from the soil and bind the advancing vanguard. But the sheer volume of the Undead Army rendered the crowd control useless. The unstoppable tide overwhelmed the elementals, exploding them into vibrant green light. The entities dropped a rare nature gem and 3 units of traces of earth. A quick search of the immediate area revealed a hidden black iron treasure chest. Fang Hao popped the latch, revealing massive loot. A green spirit field blueprint, a green mind necklace, 5 nature gems, and 15 war coins. The mind necklace boosted mental energy recovery, a perfect asset to combat the severe mental fatigue Fang Hao felt whenever he piloted his undead minions. Meanwhile, the spirit field blueprint would finally allow him to cultivate crops at an accelerated rate, securing the agricultural future of his rapidly expanding empire. Though Fang Hao's empire was drowning in meat, eating unseasoned barbecue every single meal was getting incredibly monotonous. The discovery of the green quality spirit field blueprint promised a welcome change, offering a patch of superior soil where crops could mature at an accelerated rate. After returning from a successful mapping expedition that added 8 casualties to his forces but yielded a massive 500 meat, 450 hides, and 300 bones, Fang Hao immediately initiated construction. Utilizing his stored rare materials, he spent 1,500 wood, 800 stone, 300 hemp rope, 5 nature gems, and 1 mark of the earth to manifest a pristine 10 by 10 meter agricultural plot enclosed by a clean wooden fence. However, deep within the fog of war, a deadly conspiracy was brewing at the ransacked kobold camp. A fierce 2-meter-tall orc warlord named Kedor, the volatile son of the Fireblade tribe's chieftain, had arrived with a savage raiding party. He had been lured by the kobold chief's promises of a wealthy village to plunder. But when his scouts reported that Fang Hao's territory was completely protected by an impenetrable energy shield, Kedor flew into a murderous rage, threatening to turn the kobold's head into a chamber pot for wasting his time. "Commander Kedor, I have a way to take this village," a cold voice interrupted. Stepping from the shadows was Zhuang Hong, a shrewd human lord. On his 2nd day, Zhuang Hong's base had been surrounded by the Fireblade tribe. Realizing he couldn't fight them, he chose a dark path. He became a vassal to the orcs, sacrificing his freedom to act as their tactical advisor. "Since it's protected by a shield, the owner is definitely one of my kind," Zhuang Hong explained with a sinister smile. "We can't break in, but we can easily lure him out and ambush him. Once the lord dies, the protective barrier will instantly collapse." Delighted by the treacherous plot, Kedor promised Zhuang Hong immense power within the tribe if the trap succeeded. Unaware of the looming betrayal, Fang Hao settled by his campfire at dusk, boiling a fresh pot of soup and opening the global chat. Amidst the usual clutter, his private inbox flashed. It was a desperate player who had just been severely mauled by a wild wolf. "Fang Hao, please, I need your help. Can I trade for an iron pot? I need to boil clean water immediately to clean my wounds." The trap was setting itself, and the peace of Fang Hao's fourth day was about to shatter. Instead of seeking charity, the injured lord listed a trade, a bone arrow blueprint in exchange for Fang Hao's iron pot. Though the bone-tipped arrows were fragile lowest-tier consumables, Fang Hao accepted immediately. The transaction provided him with a vital ranged weapon recipe, perfectly completing the requirements for his previously shelved two-handed light crossbow. The sluggish, brainless labor skeletons wouldn't need high combat stats. The raw lethality of mass-produced light crossbows would do all the work. While eating dinner, Fang Hao put 5,000 units of meat on the market and posted a simple inquiry: does anyone have crop seeds? Private message me with your price. The global chat paused before exploding in awe. While the rest of humanity was still eating raw meat and drinking blood, Fang Hao was officially entering the agricultural era. A player cautiously offered 20 potatoes for just 8 meat, a price Fang Hao gladly paid. He then utilized his hundredfold amplification on his recently acquired stone hoe blueprint, instantly spawning a massive pile of 101 stone hoes. He assigned a skeleton laborer to the task. To Fang Hao's surprise, the mindless undead didn't just dig aimlessly. It meticulously sliced the potatoes into chunks and planted them with professional precision. The moment the crops hit the soft soil of his green-tier spirit field, a glowing timer materialized. Distance to maturity: 6 days, 23 hours, 59 minutes. A mere 7 days to harvest. He quickly acquired garlic and chili seeds from other private sellers, expanding his burgeoning farm. Following a quick evening workout to keep his human physique from softening, Fang Hao was interrupted as 2 patrol skeletons marched up and carelessly dropped a wild boar carcass right next to him, covering him in dust. Fang Hao was about to curse them out when his eyes locked onto a smooth piece of animal hide tied to the boar's tail. Written clearly in Chinese characters was a chilling message. "Brother, I am the lord of your neighborhood. Come out and have a chat so we can help each other. I'll be waiting for you in the woods to the east." Fang Hao stared at the hide as darkness swallowed the camp. A neighboring human lord had tracked him down, but the invitation was deeply suspicious. Why ask for a meeting at night when the wilderness was at its most lethal? The stranger had to be staying in a pre-existing shelter nearby. In a flash of realization, Fang Hao's mind raced directly to the fortified kobold camp he had just slaughtered. The trap was set, and a deadly neighborhood reunion was waiting in the shadows. Clues from the boar, coarse red hair, and a deep, crushing fatal wound had triggered Fang Hao's alarm. Human lords lacked this savage strength. Anticipating a trap, he safely remained in his double bed, using divine descent to pilot a skeleton decoy filled out with straw and dressed in human clothes. To the east, the treacherous human lord Zhuang Hong stood by a torch, frantically trying to appease the volatile orc warlord Kedor. Hidden in the foliage were 2,000 Fireblade orc warriors. When the cloaked decoy arrived flanked by 2 guards, Zhuang Hong greeted him warmly. But Fang Hao's raspy proxy voice cut through the act. "Where are the people you planted? Let them out." A heavy iron blade whistled through the brush, skewering the decoy to a tree as orcs rushed out to dismantle the guards. Kedor sneered, savoring the kill until a horrific realization set in. The territory's energy shield hadn't dropped, and the outer skeletons were methodically retreating inside the barrier. Zhuang Hong ripped away the clothes, his face turning pale. It was nothing but bone and straw. Frustrated, Kedor ordered his forces back to the kobold camp to plan a morning siege. But as the torchlit army retreated, a lone, silent skeleton tracked them from the shadows, mapping their precise layout. Late at night, Fang Hao's soul snapped back to his human body. Exhausted but resolute, he knew he couldn't let this threat breathe. He stepped outside and went to work, mass manufacturing a devastating counter-arsenal. Expending his iron and newly acquired components, he mass-crafted 20 green-tier two-handed light crossbow and a mountain of 10 100 bone arrows. He drafted his massive workforce of labor skeletons, transforming them into a lethal, mechanical firing line. Lying back down, he cast divine descent, his consciousness igniting within a vanguard soldier. "Let's go," he rasped. A massive horde of over 12,000 undead units marched into the dark, trailing the orcs. Back at the kobold camp, the towering orcs were crammed into makeshift tents, eating dinner. Inside the hall, Zhuang Hong smugly comforted Kedor over the failed ambush, completely unaware that his treachery had brought the Grim Reaper to their doorstep. The lopsided war of survival was about to ignite. Inside the council hall, Kedor coldly threatened Zhuang Hong, oblivious to the impending doom. Suddenly, a violent, whistling storm tore through the night sky. A relentless 10-minute barrage of 10,000 bone arrows rained down like a giant net, ripping through fabric and shredding the camp. Enraged, Kedor rallied his remaining 1,000 warriors, charging blindly into the moonlight to slaughter the undead. But the moment they cleared the gates, the forest erupted. Fang Hao hadn't just brought a raiding party, he had unleashed an overwhelming sea of 20,000 heavily armed skeleton soldiers. The lopsided melee was absolute carnage. Within 30 minutes, the entire Fireblade detachment, including the ferocious Kedor, was completely annihilated. Stepping through the blood and gore, Fang Hao's proxy skeleton entered the hall, cornering a trembling Zhuang Hong. The traitor wept bitterly, pleading for mercy as a fellow transmigrator from Earth. "Is it wrong for me to want to live?" Zhuang Hong wailed. "I just wanted to live." Fang Hao remained entirely unmoved. In a brutal world of survival, mercy was a luxury he couldn't afford. If the roles were reversed, he would be the one bleeding out. With a swift, clean arc of his iron sword, he sliced the traitor's throat, leaving him to collapse into the dust. Showing zero superstition, Fang Hao methodically stripped the corpse, claiming Zhuang Hong's premium Earth sportswear and expensive sneakers for his own future wardrobe before ordering his skeletons to give the man a quiet burial. As the first rays of dawn broke across the horizon, Fang Hao stood amidst the ruins. A sharp, throbbing migraine pulsed behind his eyes, the grueling mental toll of maintaining divine descent through an entire night of intense, large-scale tactical warfare. He quickly ordered his legion to strip the orc corpses of all armor and weapons, load the flatbed carts, and secure the camp. His mind buckling under the exhaustion, Fang Hao finally severed the mental link. Snapping back into his own human flesh, safe behind his sanctuary's shield, Fang Hao took a quick sip of water and collapsed into a well-deserved, catatonic sleep. His neighborhood was finally clear. Waking up at noon, Fang Hao's human body demanded fuel. As he roasted meat, his inbox buzzed with panicked messages from lords terrified he had died, desperate for their daily food supply. Even downstream player Zhang Bin posted a chat update. He had just hauled up a river net jammed with armed skeleton remains wearing leather armor. Fang Hao smiled. The rivers were literally washing away the evidence of his midnight war. After breakfast, Fang Hao cast Divine Descent to pilot a skeleton soldier at the conquered camp. The raw battlefield hall was staggering. Resources: 1,742 wriggling spines, 120 iron, 80 hides, 50 war coins. Logistics and intel: 12 carts, fruit, salt, and a Manhwa market map leading to a peaceful orc trading post. More importantly, his skeletons uninstalled a rare, heavy prize from Kedor's corpse, the purple quality Bloodthirsty set. Bloodthirsty set purple, level 5 defense, set bonus Berserker, every kill stacks a 1% strength buff for 8 seconds up to 50 times. While shaking a severed orc finger out of one of the gauntlets, a byproduct of his skeleton's stiff, aggressive looting style, Fang Hao ordered the caravan back to base. Once the convoy safely unloaded its massive bounty into his sanctuary, Fang Hao severed the proxy link. Returning to his human flesh felt like stepping back into a world of color. This single defense contract had turned into a massive economic jackpot. With his newbie protection countdown ticking away, these 1,742 new wriggling spines meant he could instantly amplify his army into an ungodly legion of over 170,000 soldiers. Unlike other lords trapped in a bottleneck of worker starvation, his deathless, foodless workforce cost him absolutely zero upkeep. Finally, Fang Hao approached the spoils and pulled out Zhuang Hong's confiscated ledger. The moment it brushed his own, a brilliant system notice flashed. System: Enemy Lord's Book devoured. You have gained absolute decision-making power over Zhuang Hong's territory. Option 1. Occupy, transform it into a functional vassal territory for resource extraction. Option 2. Abandon, instantly strip 50% to 80% of the base's raw resources and erase it from the map. Fang Hao stared at the flashing interface. It was time to choose how his dark empire would expand. Analyzing the geopolitical reality, Fang Hao opted for the safer path. Zhuang Hong's base was sitting dangerously close to a hostile orc tribe and was legally bound as their vassal. Trying to split his forces to defend a distant, compromised outpost was a recipe for disaster. He clicked Abandon. System: Territory abandoned. Received 80% of current stockpile resources and a 50% refund on building materials. In a spectacular burst of starlight, a staggering mountain of pillaged resources materialized in Fang Hao's open courtyard. Simultaneously, his master ledger began to hum with new power. Devouring a rival lord's certificate had triggered an unprecedented evolution. System: Lord's Book upgraded to level 2. Passive bonuses: marching speed plus 1%, resource gathering rate plus 2%. Permissions: daily regional channel chat limit increased by 10 messages. Blueprints unlocked: Torch Ranch building, Lumberyard building. Fang Hao realized the terrifying implications of this hidden mechanic. If the global player base discovered that hunting other human lords was a shortcut to unlocking massive fractional buffs and exclusive blueprints, the world would instantly devolve into a ruthless bat. L'Oreal. Curious about what the rest of the world was doing, he scrolled through the global chat. The entire channel was currently losing its mind over his downstream neighbor, Zhang Bin. Armed with a militia, Zhang Bin had walked upstream and hooked an absolute jackpot of over 10 sets of discarded leather armor and helmets washed down from Fang Hao's midnight war. Players were already crowning Zhang Bin as the new, supreme big shot of the region. Fang Hao shook his head with a wry smile. These people were throwing a digital parade over a few pieces of low-tier trash, completely oblivious to the fact that Fang Hao was currently sitting on a mountain of high-grade orc weaponry and a legendary purple armor set. Suddenly, a private message disrupted his scrolling. It was Dong Jiayu. "Brother Hao, are you still alive?" she typed frantically. "What kind of talk is that?" Fang Hao shot back. Relieved, she offered him 5 newly excavated shadow stones. To ensure her survival as his premier mineral pipeline, Fang Hao bypassed her offer to write off her old weapon debt and loaded a generous 150 units of meat into the trade interface. Dong Jiayu explained that the iron swords and shields he lent her had completely saved her life. Her tactical plunge into the third chamber of the ancient tomb had unleashed a horde of uncommanded, hostile skeletons. Without his gear, her squad would have been massacred. "That's good, be careful," Fang Hao replied, sounding like a protective old father. "Only by surviving can we achieve stable development." Before closing the prompt, Dong Jiayu sent a tentative follow-up. "By the way, Haoji, do you happen to have any defensive protective gear? Anything at all is fine." She confessed she had tried to barter with the newly famous Zhang Bin for armor, but his greedy extortion pricing broke the deal. She was just asking Fang Hao as a desperate last resort. Fang Hao looked out at his warehouse, which was practically bursting with hundreds of sets of robust, steel-reinforced orc leather armor. "Yes," Fang Hao replied calmly. "How much do you need? I'll prepare it for you." Dong Jiayu stared at her private messages, completely stunned. While the global channel was busy worshipping Zhang Bin for salvaging a few scrap pieces of armor, Fang Hao was casually offering to supply her entire crew. When she tentatively asked for 7 sets, he bypassed her offer of basic materials, giving her the gear up front as an investment for future rare blueprints. He sent over 6 simple leather sets and 1 advanced orc iron armor set specifically for her. After the trade, Fang Hao turned his attention to the purple-quality bloodthirsty breastplate. It was incredibly heavy, built like a thick block of solid iron. Even when he used Divine Descent to test it on a skeleton soldier, the extreme weight completely hindered normal movement in combat. Realizing reality was vastly different from a video game, he cursed his lack of physical strength and put the armor away until his attributes improved. Next, Fang Hao focused on his newly unlocked blueprints, constructing a level 1 ranch and a level 1 lumberyard outside his base. The lumberyard instantly boosted wood harvesting efficiency, and he stationed skeleton soldiers to guard it. While his massive cache of 1,700 wriggling spines gave him the potential to raise an army of 100,000 undead, he opted to keep his population stable to avoid drawing unnecessary regional threats. Eager to continue mapping, Fang Hao used Divine Descent again to pilot a skeleton soldier, leading a vanguard of 2,000 troops south through a dense mountain pass. Suddenly, he spotted a young unicorn lamb grazing peacefully in a clearing. Recognizing a perfect opportunity to source goat's milk for his empty ranch, he ordered his mindless troops to surround the creature safely without harming it. The lamb panicked and bolted. As the rigid skeletons scrambled to trap it alive, the surprisingly strong animal slammed directly into a soldier's chest, sending the bones flying backward like a cannonball. A chaotic 20-minute chase ensued through thick brush and twisting vines. Though the swift creature ultimately vanished into the deep forest, the pursuit led Fang Hao directly to a monumental discovery. Standing tall before the skeletal army was a massive, ancient citadel surrounded by a dark thicket of thorns and wild roses, Shallow Wind's fortress. The castle was ancient, its towering gray stone walls suffocating under dark green vines. Giving up on the escaped lamb, Fang Hao focused entirely on this eerie structure. Backed by his vanguard of 2,000 skeleton soldiers, he ordered the corroded, groaning gates pushed open. Stepping into the courtyard, he found it wasn't a mortal courtyard at all, but a sprawling cemetery choked with weeds and tombstones. Suddenly, a grayish-white crystal catching the light caught his eye. It was a shadow stone, realizing these rare undead building materia. Owls were scattered right before him. He ordered a soldier to retrieve them. The moment the skeleton stepped onto the brick path, the courtyard ground began to shake violently. Maggot-infested, rotting corpses broke through the soil, weapons raised. System: Rotting Corpse Tier 1, cannon fodder of the Eternal Night Legion. Fang Hao joked about sitting down for a chat, but the foul-smelling mob surged forward. "Kill them," he commanded. In the ensuing clash, the lopsided math favored Fang Hao. His soldiers were fully armored with iron swords and wooden shields, while the fragile corpses were naked and decaying. The bone tide effortlessly hacked the zombies into pulp. Cleaning the battlefield, he harvested 5 shadow stones, 1 trace of death, 122 broken single-edged swords, and an inner city key labeled Shadowwind Keep, where the servants of Eternal Night await your next game. Treating it like a video game dungeon, Fang Hao unlocked the rusty metal doors and climbed the stone steps to the second level. Inside, the grand Western-style stone castle was lined with white roses slithering through broken windows. There were no clumsy corpses here. Instead, disciplined undead rose silently from stone crypts, tightly clutching metallic pikes. System: Zombie Spearman Tier 2, skills: Thrust, Charge, Parry. Unlike the mindless rabble outside, these Tier 2 zombies fell into a tight phalanx, raised a tattered battle standard, and advanced with lethal military precision. Realizing their rank advantage, Fang Hao adjusted his tactics. "Spread out and prepare for battle," he bellowed, his proxy voice rasping through the hall as his massive army moved to flank the formation. The zombie spearmen moved with rigid, haunting coordination, instantly locking into a defensive square. Their leveled pikes created a miniature, lethal phalanx. Recognizing their formation, Fang Hao barked through his proxy vocal cords, "Scatter, surround them." Skeletons swarmed, encircling the 300 undead. Without a live commander, the brainless zombies grew confused, uselessly shifting their pikes like turning clock hands. Seizing the opening, Fang Hao ordered a total assault. Skeletons rushed from all sides. Head-on chargers were launched into the air by the iron pikes, but the flanking units closed the distance, unleashing a brutal barrage of iron swords. Fang Hao lunged from the side, hacking through a spearman's neck until viscous, dark blood spilled out. The Tier 2 zombies fought fiercely, costing Fang Hao over 30 skeleton casualties. Even his proxy body suffered a shattered left shoulder from a blunt spear shaft, leaving his shield arm dangling limply. Wrapping a tattered banner around his broken ribs, Fang Hao secured the spoils: 7 shadow stones, 2 signs of death, 324 iron spears, and an exclusive iron spear blueprint. Using the acquired castle key, the skeletons heaved open the inner keep doors. Fang Hao's eyes widened. Unlike the gloomy ruins outside, the grand castle hall was a luxurious, brightly lit palace featuring gleaming floors and glowing crystal chandeliers. But his awe vanished when he looked at the stone pillars lining the red carpet. Crouched atop each column was a massive, muscular, bat-like monstrosity with razor-sharp talons. Fang Hao sent a frontline row to scout ahead. The moment they stepped onto the carpet, the entities opened their crimson eyes. System: Bloodthirsty Bat Wolf Tier 5, skills: Flight, Bloodlust. A Tier 5 nightmare, the first beast swooped down, instantly shredding the scouts into airborne bone fragments. The remaining 5 unleashed blood-curdling roars and pounced. "Fight, kill them," Fang Hao roared. The narrow hall bottlenecked his army, completely neutralizing his numerical advantage. The 6 monstrous batwolves tore through leather armor and crushed skulls with terrifying, elite strength. Whenever they took damage, they glided upward, letting their wounds dry before diving back down into the bone horde. To survive the onslaught, Fang Hao ordered his units to anchor against the back wall. Spotting him barking orders, a batwolf charged him at blinding speed. Fang Hao lunged aside as the beast slammed face-first into the stone wall, leaving it momentarily dazed. "Idiot, kill it," Fang Hao cursed. His soldiers swarmed the stunned monster, hacking until thick red blood sprayed, yet despite the heavy wounds, the Tier 5 vitality kept it breathing. With over 100 skeletons already annihilated, Fang Hao realized a straight fight was suicide. "Retreat and close the door," he commanded. The skeletons moved seamlessly, backing out of the palace and slamming the heavy castle gates shut to trap the beasts inside. "Hold the gate," Fang Hao rasped to the guards. "I'm going back to bring the rest of the army." Severing the proxy link, Fang Hao returned to his human flesh and immediately prioritized a counter-strategy. The Tier 5 bloodthirsty bat wolves were incredibly lethal, but their true advantage was flight. His swordsmen simply couldn't match their aerial agility. To break them, Fang Hao changed the rules of engagement. He opened the Lord's Book and mass-crafted another massive volley of 10 100 bone arrows. He ordered his troops to load 10 flatbed carts with 2,000 stockpiled light crossbows, hundreds of iron daggers, and long wooden poles. Lacking the master blueprint leisure to forge proper steel spears, he improvised, firmly binding the daggers to the wooden shafts with hemp rope to create 200 makeshift pikes. Combined with the salvaged weapons from the spearmen, he amassed a defensive forest of 545 spears. Re-entering his proxy skeleton soldier, Fang Hao marched a reinforced legion of 3,000 units back to the fortress. His guards unlatched the heavy castle gates. Peering through the crack, he saw the 6 monstrous bat wolves perched back on their stone pillars, eyes shut like statues. "Move in fast," Fang Hao hissed. The skeletons flooded the narrow hall, boxing the beasts in. The moment the monsters opened their crimson eyes and roared, Fang Hao didn't hesitate. Fire! 2,000 crossbowmen pulled their triggers. A dense, roaring net of bone arrows shredded the air, pelting the airborne predators in an inescapable indoor ambush. Shrieking in agony, the lead Batwolf launched a furious downward dive. Fang Hao was waiting, spears up. A glittering wall of iron pikes locked into position. Unable to break, the descending monster impaled itself violently across the front line, its fleshy wings pierced through. Instantly, the surrounding swordsmen swarmed the trapped beast, hacking its head into a bloody mess. The remaining 5 monsters hovered in absolute horror, but the relentless mechanical undead had already reloaded. 3 successive volleys of arrows turned the flying predators into bleeding porcupines, piercing their wings and grounding their flight. Desperate and dying, the remaining beasts made one final, reckless charge, only to be ruthlessly pinned by the spears and dismantled by chaotic axe strikes. After an hour of intense warfare, the Tier 5 tyrants were dead. Dragging the massive carcasses out, Fang Hao ordered a sweeping search of the palace floor. Deep within the ruins, a skeleton hand pulled out a rare, dark prize, the Skull Conversion Site Blueprint. The blue-quality Skull Conversion Field Blueprint was a massive victory. These structures allowed Fang Hao to bury any fallen creature or biological remains and transform them into a corresponding skeleton unit type, which could then be permanently unlocked for standard recruitment using wriggling spines. Since his main body still held the Master Lord's Book, he safely pocketed the schematic alongside 27 newly discovered war coins. Leaving the ground floor wreckage, Fang Hao handpicked a small vanguard of 10 skeleton soldiers to join him upstairs. The higher levels of the fortress were tightly partitioned into narrow hallways and private quarters, rendering his massive numerical advantage useless. A cluttered layout meant brute force numbers would only lead to a bottleneck disaster. They methodically cleared the dusty, long-abandoned rooms until they reached a lavish study adorned with flowing blue curtains. On the desk sat a golden lampstand crafted from luminescent neon stone, the mystical equivalent of a glowing pearl, and a half-read journal. Picking up the text, Fang Hao read the very first translated sentence. "Life is a kind of cancer, but I have found a cure for it. System, clues to the elixir of immortality collected 1-5. Fang Hao's eyes flared with intense curiosity. In this brutal new reality filled with shifting magical factions, absolute longevity was no myth. Skimming further, he unearthed critical lore about his environment. The hostile Eternal Night Legion belonged to a prominent vampire faction, while his own faction was recognized globally as the Immortal. They both raised the dead, but they were distinct rival forces. A thorough, aggressive search of the study yielded a versatile directional teleportation scroll for instantaneous emergency travel, a vital therapeutic agent capable of healing severe physical trauma in a world completely devoid of hospitals, and 5 rare bloodstones, the essential resource needed to construct advanced vampire structures. Ascending the grand stone steps to the final floor, Fang Hao bypassed 2 dusty Batwolf statues and halted before a towering, intricately carved master bedroom door. Signaling his tireless minions forward, they heaved together, slowly cracking the heavy wood open. Fang Hao cautiously peered through the dusty gap. Resting squarely in the center of the dark, luxurious chamber was a massive, pitch-black coffin. The structural clues were clear. The ruler of Shallow Wind's fortress was an elite vampire. The absolute silence felt profoundly wrong. The previous battle on the first floor had been incredibly loud. The heavy gates had been pulverized. And a Tier 5 monster had been violently executed. Even the most deep-sleeping apex predator should have awakened by now. Hold the threshold, Fang Hao commanded the guards in a tense rasp. Drawing his iron blade, he slipped silently through the narrow opening, tiptoeing past the heavy velvet curtains toward the black sarcophagus. The final boss of the keep was waiting, and the game was about to reach its deadly climax. Fang Hao carefully slipped inside, finding a massive room draped in elegant Gothic luxury. Right in the center sat the flamboyantly ornate black and gold coffin. Ignoring the craftsmanship for a second, Fang Hao headed straight for the window. His plan was pure tactical instinct. Open every curtain, throw open the shutters, and let the blinding, unadulterated sunlight flood the chamber. If a vampire was nesting inside, it was time to let the sun handle the execution. With a hard yank, heavy fabric parted and bright midday sun burst into the gloomy room, forcing the luminescent wall stones to dim. Fang Hao gestured to his guards. Open it. The skeletons gripped the lid, heaving together until it slammed open. Fang Hao leaned in, weapons ready, but it was entirely empty. The commotion downstairs had clearly cleared out the resident long ago. System: exquisite corpse nourishing coffin blueprint blue recorded. Description: calms the mind and nourishes spiritual power. Though a bit macabre, it was a high-tier blue item. He'd hang onto it to trade later. Moving deeper into a hidden side room, the skeleton struck absolute jackpot, a shimmering golden treasure chest. It was his first gold chest since arriving in this world. Fang Hao rubbed his hands together, offered a quick prayer to any god listening, and popped the latch. Loot acquired. Level 1 City Wall Construction Blueprint. Guardian Pavilion Construction Blueprint. Hardwood Plank Crafting Blueprint. Flame Ring Blue Quality. Plus 120 war coins / plus 40 bloodstones. The haul was phenomenal. The city wall would finally secure his open perimeter, while the Guardian Pavilion provided a crucial defensive outpost, boosting station units' attributes by 2% and granting threat detection. The Flame Ring was an absolute game-changer, granting Fang Hao his first active offensive magic spell, a level 3 fireball with continuous burn damage. Heading downstairs, Fang Hao ordered his legion to strip the castle bare, but as he crossed the threshold, his skeletal foot caught on a heavy, rectangular block. System: stone bricks building material detected. Fang Hao stopped in his tracks. The block had broken loose from the archway during the violent clash with the Batwolves. Upgrading his lord's cabin to level 4 strictly required stone bricks, a rare material nobody in the global chat had even discovered yet. Looking up at the colossal, sprawling stone fortress, a brilliant, chaotic idea formed. Why search for a blueprint when I can just systematically demolish this N? Rather than utilizing divine descent and risking further mental exhaustion, Fang Hao personally rode out in a flatbed cart to lead the massive, serpentine procession of 1,700 skeleton laborers toward Shadowwind Fortress. With his base already overflowing with timber and stone, halting basic resource collection to harvest rare, high-tier stone bricks was an easy tactical choice. Arriving at the fortress, he found the outer courtyard transformed into a chaotic scrapyard. His brainless skeleton soldiers had thoroughly looted the interior, but completely lacked the nuance to preserve the valuables, leaving a mountain of flattened furniture and crushed brass. Shaking his head, Fang Hao methodically scribbled the newly won blueprints into his Master Lord's book and slid the rest of the treasure into his improvised leather pack. Slipping the blue-quality flame ring onto his finger, he decided to test his first offensive magic spell. He extended his palm, silently chanting blazing fireball. A searing, fist-sized sphere of plasma instantly hovered above his skin, completely harmless to him. He hurled it at a nearby dilapidated monument. Bang! The concussive force sheared the stone tablet cleanly in half, igniting a lingering magical blaze that torched the rubble for a full 3 minutes. Satisfied with his new level 3 damage projectile, Fang Hao climbed the castle stairs and barked his orders to the labor force below: tear this fortress down and sort the stone bricks. He left a defense grid of 5,000 skeleton soldiers to secure the perimeter against wandering wilderness beasts and manage a constant, rolling convoy of flatbed carts pulling materials back to base. As his cart rattled back toward the village, Fang Hao checked his private inbox to pass the time. A player offered a rare mark of the earth for an iron pot, which Fang Hao happily accepted, charging a small iron premium for the processing. Immediately after, a second trader messaged him frantically, requesting 50 in iron axes up front. Stunned by the client's ability to easily supply 45 units of raw iron ore, Fang Hao poked for intelligence. The player candidly revealed they had settled right on top of a massive iron ore deposit and asked if Fang Hao could supply iron pickaxes next. Lacking the blueprint, Fang Hao locked in the axe trade and promised to notify them upon completion. The caravan finally rolled up to the perimeter of his territory when a sudden, violent uproar shattered the midday peace. Enraged shouts and the heavy clatter of steel echoed from the tall grass just outside his base. Fang Hao leaped onto the roof of his cart, his eyes narrowing. A traveling, horse-drawn merchant caravan had inadvertently stumbled too close to his border and was currently surrounded by his ruthless, unyielding patrol skeletons. The merchants were being utterly slaughtered, their annihilation was minutes away. Jumping down, Fang Hao rushed toward the skirmish, his voice cutting through the clashing iron. "Cease fire, form a perimeter and hold them down." Instantly, the fearless skeleton soldiers froze their blades midair, shifting smoothly into a crushing, claustrophobic circle around the bleeding, terrified survivors. Gasping for breath, the 20-odd remaining pigmen huddled in a terrified cluster, their bloodshot eyes locked onto the suffocating wall of bone encircling them. These greedy merchants from a northern village had spotted Fang Hao's massive outdoor resource cache while traveling to the Manhwa market. Coveting the vast meat supply, they tried to pilfer a lucrative haul, only to trigger a flawless ambush by the local patrol skeletons. A 100-man crew was ruthlessly whittled down to a desperate remnant. Just as they prepared to be dismantled, the bone tide suddenly parted. A young human man calmly stepped into the clearing, evaluating them with cold curiosity. "How did you end up here?" Fang Hao asked solemnly. Parker, the cunning caravan leader, swallowed hard, his small eyes darting frantically between Fang Hao and his tireless undead legion. "My lord, we are a simple village caravan. Passing through this area, there was a minor misunderstanding with your soldiers." Fang Hao's gaze drifted past Parker's trembling frame to the 5 horse-drawn wagons. 4 were tightly draped in sun-blocking tarpaulins, but the 5th lay exposed, clumsily packed with stolen pelts, tools, and a wooden bathtub belonging to Fang Hao's base. Realizing the theft was laid bare, Parker's massive snout dripped with sweat. He instantly pivoted to the only universal law the brutal orc continent respected: strength. "Sir, we recognize our mistake. We are fully prepared to offer immediate compensation." "Come on, let's talk somewhere else," Fang Hao replied quietly, gesturing away from the blood-soaked soil. Escorted into the main courtyard under a crushing vanguard of bone guards, Fang Hao casually sat on a smooth rock while the remaining pigmen stood rigidly at attention. Through careful interrogation, Fang Hao confirmed their route mapped directly to the Manhwa market, the exact same peaceful orc trading hub he had looted a map for earlier. When asked if anyone could enter, Parker glanced nervously at Fang Hao's bleak undead faction and stuttered that it would be highly problematic. "All right," Fang Hao's voice dropped, turning sharp and predatory. "Let's discuss your penance. You plundered my storehouses and destroyed my property. It's a bit insulting to think you can simply walk away." Parker gritted his teeth. "Sir, we will leave 1 full wagon of premium goods as a fine." Fang Hao burst into a cold, amused chuckle. "If I execute you right now, all 5 wagons belong to me anyway. Why do you think a fractional payout buys your lives?" Panic seized the merchants, thick sweat poured down their faces like raindrops. "You have exactly 1 minute, Fang Hao warned, leaning back. "Produce something of actual value or you stay here permanently." The heavy silence stretched, the agonizing countdown pushing the pigmen to the absolute brink of psychological collapse. Finally, the time elapsed. "Time's up," Fang Hao commanded smoothly. "Execute them." "No, wait, my lord, war coins, we have war coins," Parker shrieked in absolute desperation, his voice cracking with the terror of impending death. Fang Hao's eyes narrowed instantly. "Hold your blades." The descending iron swords froze midair. Fang Hao locked his gaze onto the trembling caravan leader. "Go on," he prompted softly. Wiping the stinging sweat from his eyes, Parker panted rapidly, terrified to slow down. "Sir, war coins are the absolute baseline currency accepted across the entire continent. If you grant us mercy, we will pay you directly in pure coin to secure your total forgiveness." Hearing the phrase war currency, Fang Hao's interest peaked. The enigmatic skeleton merchant would be returning to his territory in just a few days, and his rare blueprint ledger was zealous without a heavy stack of war coins. "Do you have war coins on you?" Fang Hao demanded. Yes, Parker nodded frantically before backtracking under Fang Hao's tightening glare. "And not on my person, my lord. Please listen, our village has a treasury. We will leave a high-value hostage as collateral while we return to raise the funds." Parker pulled back the tarpaulin of the final wagon, revealing an old, heavily bandaged pigman slick with fresh blood. Our former captain, Bolton, injured his leg and is slowing us down. We will leave him in your care, return with the coin by morning, and redeem him." Fang Hao systematically inspected the remaining cargo: 2 wagons of premium furs, 1 wagon of raw iron ore, and the final truck filled with the goods they had just pilfered from his base. Recognizing that a steady stream of pure coin was infinitely more valuable than slaughtering 20 minor pigmen for low-tier meat, Fang Hao stepped back. "Deal," Fang Hao spat coldly. "If 100 war coins aren't on my desk by sunrise, I execute your old captain and burn your village to ash." Parker bowed subserviently, leading the remnant of his caravan away. But the moment they cleared the tree line, a treacherous, bloodthirsty glint flared in Parker's small eyes. "Captain," a subordinate whispered, "are we truly paying the human?" "Fool," Parker sneered. "Agreeing was merely a tool to survive. An orc warrior never abandons the prize. We hide in the mountains until midnight. Tonight we take back our wagons and slaughter that human boy with interest. As for old Bolton, if he dies by human hands, my claim to the captaincy becomes absolute." Back at the base, Fang Hao was entirely unbothered by the merchant's departure. He stationed a rigid perimeter of 20 skeleton soldiers around the wounded hostage. "Watch him. If he touches the storehouses or tries to crawl away, terminate him." Turning his attention back to his economy, the seized caravan loot officially added 120 iron and 1,125 furs to his stockpiles. He quickly honored his pending private trades, utilizing his hundredfold amplification to manifest 101 iron pots and distributing the promised axes and cookware to his clients. With his inventory bursting with shadow stones harvested from Shallow Wind's fortress, it was finally time to shatter his military bottleneck. He approached his core recruitment structure and initialized a massive double upgrade. System: Burial Grounds upgraded to level 2, Skeleton Soldiers unlocked. Expending a further 8 shadow stones and a heavy toll of wood and stone, he pushed the structure again. System: Burial Grounds upgraded to level 3, New Unit unlocked, Skeleton Spearmen. Delighted by the milestone, Fang Hao immediately accessed the interface, eager to test the martial capabilities of his first Tier 2 equivalent variant. System: Consume 1 wriggling spine to recruit a Skeleton Spearman. Recruit, Fang Hao commanded. System: Hundredfold amplification triggered, 101 skeleton spearmen successfully mobilized. A blinding array of unholy light bathed the courtyard. Emerging from the dust stood a flawless, synchronized rank of over 100 skeletal shock troops, clutching razor-sharp pikes. His army was evolving just in time for Parker's midnight betrayal. The newly mobilized skeleton spearmen brought a crucial tactical evolution to Fang Hao's forces. While visually similar to standard infantry, their inherent basic spear proficiency transformed them into an unyielding countercharge vanguard. System: Skeleton Spearman Tier 1, Abilities: Spear Thrust. Note: Immune to morale, poison, and mind magic. Once locked into position, their pikes ignore all enemy charge bonuses. Remembering how raw piercing power had dismantled the Tier 5 Batwolves, Fang Hao conducted 5 more recruitment cycles. His hundredfold amplification instantly triggered, expanding his line by 505 spearmen. He mass-produced matching wooden shields and iron pikes, mobilizing a unified force of 606 shock troops to patrol and hunt the perimeter. With his front line secured, Fang Hao pivoted to territorial defense. The countdown on his newbie sanctuary shield was running out. He opened his blueprint ledger and initialized sequential, massive upgrades to his perimeter. System: Level 1 city wall constructed. Perimeter protected by a 2-meter-tall log barrier. Demanding higher security, Fang Hao aggressively funneled his vast stockpiles into the ledger. Light bathed the borders as he pushed the wall to level 2, increasing its thickness and soaring its height to 5 meters before immediately launching a massive level 3 structural overhaul. 5 minutes later, a heavy hybrid fortress wall stood towering over the landscape. The base was reinforced with 3 meters of solid stone, topped by thick, spiked logs, complete with elevated defensive catwalks for his patrolling undead. Next, he materialized the Guardian Pavilion directly in front of his cabin. Since he was the only living entity in a territory of bones, he was the one who needed absolute protection. He linked the magical pavilion to his Tier 3 Lord's hut and deployed 2 stoic skeleton soldiers to stand guard. Instantly, a protective aura enveloped his home, granting his gatekeepers a 2% attribute buff and absolute threat perception. By the time the defenses were set, the sky had turned a deep crimson. Starving and exhausted, Fang Hao roasted a fresh batch of meat, desperately wishing his newly planted spirit field potatoes would mature faster to break up his monotonous diet. He opened the regional chat to unwind, watching other human lords complain about tactical blunders and toxic mushroom poisonings. Suddenly, a frantic trade offer caught his eye. Urgently needs spears and bows to clear monsters in the water, trading a hardwood shield blueprint. Fang Hao smiled, his fingers instantly hovering over the keyboard. His next economy expansion was falling right into place. Fang Hao closed the trade prompt, quite satisfied. By utilizing a mix of 3 pristine iron spears and 10 broken, rusty spears salvaged from the fortress zombies, he had secured the white-quality hardwood shield blueprint without disrupting market values. The moment the other player hyped the deal on the regional channel, the chat exploded with awe, crowning Fang Hao as the ultimate Iron Tier Titan. But Fang Hao remained grounded. In a world where elites from Earth died daily, complacency was a death sentence. After treating himself to a warm, relaxing bath, a luxury he could finally afford, he stepped outside to expand his military infrastructure before bed. He halted at the open space beside his burial grounds to construct the skull conversion field. System: Rare Tier Skull Conversion Field constructed. Unlike a standard barracks, this structure functioned as a genetic ledger for the undead. He needed to bury a biological species first to unlock and record its unit type for future recruitment. Fang Hao ordered his soldiers to drag over the 6 massive carcasses of the Tier 5 bloodthirsty bat wolves. "Throw one in," he commanded. The moment the beast hit the pit, the earth softened into a churning, muddy swamp, swallowing the fleshy mass whole. 1 minute later, the soil burst open. System transformation complete. Unlock Tier 3 unit, Skeleton Giant Bat. A grotesque avian monstrosity constructed of pure, hollow bone tore into the sky, its skeletal wings lined with a translucent, leather-like membrane that allowed it to catch the wind. Fang Hao scrutinized its attributes. The process had a clear drawback. The transformation caused a slight genetic degradation, stripping the original creature's wolf-like mass down to the size of a large vulture and demoting it from Tier 5 to Tier 3. Furthermore, this initial structural conversion did not trigger his hundredfold amplification. "Bury the rest," Fang Hao ordered. The remaining 5 Batwolf carcasses vanished into the pit, yielding 5 more Tier 3 flyers. Though smaller than the living alphas, Fang Hao smiled as the flock roosted nearby. He had officially filled his faction's critical air defense bottleneck. He now possessed a functional, terrifying gargoyle vanguard. Soaking in a warm bath and returning to a newly renovated cabin, complete with soft carpets and the gentle glow of neon stone chandeliers, was the first taste of true luxury Fang Hao had experienced in this world. But peace never lasted long. Lying in bed, curiosity got the better of him. He activated Divine Descent, targeting one of his newly converted Tier 3 skeleton giant bats. System target Skullbat, compatibility 45%. The lower compatibility meant his mind felt heavy and rigid within the avian frame, but he quickly adjusted to the mechanics. Spreading his leathery, translucent bone wings, he launched off the warehouse roof into the cool night air. It felt exactly like a high-fidelity VR flight simulator. He glided over his silent borders, watching his labor forces mechanically tending to the potato fields. Suddenly, a tiny glint of light in the distant thicket caught his compound eyes. Intrigued, he veered off course, riding the wind currents toward the glow. Below him, fresh wagon tire tracks scarred the dirt. Perching silently on a thick branch directly above the fire, Fang Hao's jaw would have dropped if he still had flesh. It was Parker and the remnant of the pigman caravan. "Captain, won't this fire alert that kid?" a subordinate mumbled, chewing on roasted meat. Parker scoffed, adjusting his heavy armor. "That human brat is weak. He's hiding behind his shield, and those low-level skeletons are brainless. Tonight we slip past their patrol routes, steal back our goods, and then torch his entire timber supply. We'll teach that human bastard a lesson he won't survive." Fang Hao didn't need to hear another word. Flapping his wings, he silently ascended into the starry sky, racing ahead of the thieves back to High S domain. An hour later, the moon dipped behind a heavy layer of clouds. Parker and his armed raiders crept out from the tree line, successfully dodging a few intentionally misplaced skeleton patrols. They reached the open courtyard, their eyes widening at the sight of the looted castle furniture, carpets, and neon stones. Load it up, take the valuables first, hurry, Parker hissed, greed completely blinding him. Hey, A loud, casual yawn shattered the silence. The pigmen froze, their blood running cold. Turning slowly, they saw a figure sitting calmly on a crate just a few meters away, quietly tracking their every movement. It was Fang Hao. Behind him, the seemingly lax skeleton patrols materialized from the shadows like a rising wall of bone, locking the perimeter completely. When did you get there? Parker stammered, his snout twitching in terror. You think this is a game? Fang Hao's voice cut through the dark, devoid of any mercy. I gave you a path to survival, Parker. You just mistook my magnanimity for stupidity. No, wait, we can trade. Kill them, Fang Hao commanded flatly. The unholy horde surged forward like a crushing tsunami. Trapped and desperate, Parker screamed for a breakthrough charge, but the cold iron spears of the undead closed in instantly, turning the dark courtyard into a frantic, inescapable slaughterhouse. The desperate, chaotic skirmish reached its breaking point after 20 grueling minutes. Covered in deep lacerations, Parker managed to wrench himself free from the closing phalanx of bones. Flanked by his last two surviving raiders, he bolted toward the dark sanctuary of the forest line. Fang Hao merely sneered at the retreating figures. Stepping forward, he leveled his left hand and unleashed the destructive energy of the flame ring. Whoosh! A blinding, fist-sized plasma sphere tore through the night sky, illuminating the brush with an intense, sudden heat wave. Parker spun his head around just in time to see the incoming spell, his pig-like face warping in absolute terror before the fireball impacted directly against his chest. Boom! The concussive blast hurled the captain's body deep into the dirt, where he lay entirely motionless, his heavy armor consumed by a crackling magical blaze. The two remaining raiders gasped, sprinting blindly into the thickets. But before they could clear the clearing, a shadow dropped from the canopy. The Tier 3 skeleton giant bats swooped down with terrifying speed, their massive talons instantly executing the fleeing thieves. Once the forest fell silent, Fang Hao stepped over the threshold, wrinkling his nose at the unmistakable scent of roasted meat radiating from Parker's charred remains. Strip them, throw the corpses into the conversion field, and restore our storehouses, Fang Hao commanded flatly. The mindless skeletons dragged the bodies back to the pit, churning them into basic Tier 1 undead infantry while recovering 27 orc single-edged swords and 8 writhing spinal cords. Back in the secure center of his base, Fang Hao sat down on a heavy wooden bench, locking his gaze onto the wounded pigman hostage left behind from the afternoon. I just systematically erased your entire crew, Fang Hao stated coldly. Do you have anything to say? Bolton, weak and pale from blood loss, offered a tired, hollow nod. I heard Parker's screams. They allowed greed to dictate their actions twice. They brought this judgment upon themselves. Intrigued, Fang Hao leaned in. I'm curious about your internal logistics. Why cooperate with a captain who clearly left you behind to die? Coughing violently, Bolton revealed the truth. He was the original caravan leader, but during their march from the northern tribe, his ambitious second-in-command Parker had organized a mutiny, maimed his leg, and placed him under house arrest. Parker kept him alive only because Bolton was the only one who truly mapped the treacherous trade route to the Manhwa orc market. Leaving him behind as a proxy hostage was just a convenient way to let human blades finish off the old captain. I stayed because our village population is critically low, Bolton sighed heavily. If the entire caravan died trying to fight you, the tribe would collapse. I chose to bear the consequence so they could return. Quite the saint, Fang Hao muttered to himself, thoroughly amused by the old orc's unexpected moral code. Still, the underlying lore settled perfectly into his grand strategic calculus. His hundredfold amplification granted him infinite manufacturing capability. If he could leverage Bolton's navigation skills to infiltrate the peaceful Manhwa market, he could corner the economic circuit and secure an unlimited flow of war coins. Your story is compelling enough to spare your home village, Fang Hao announced, causing the crippled pigman to fall to his knees in profound gratitude. But you belong to me now. You spend the night outside our shield, and tomorrow I dictate your new employments. Don't think about crawling away. The following morning, a dense alpine mist drifted over the fortress walls. Fang Hao emerged from his cabin, stretching his limbs as he walked into the courtyard. He looked at the timber marking board by his door. Day 6. Tomorrow marked the absolute conclusion of the global newbie protection shield. The impending threat of a lawless world sent a sharp jolt of survival instinct through his chest. Stealing his nerves, he ran his rigorous warm-up laps, pushed through 5 intense sets of core exercises, and lit the breakfast fire to grill fresh meat while listing his surplus food trades on the market to maintain his regional dominance. As the fat dripped into the embers, Fang Hao looked over at the perimeter wall. "Bring the pigmen inside." A prompt flashed instantly before his eyes. System notice: non-territorial entity Bolton requests entry past the barrier. Allow. Allow, Fang Hao muttered. Escorted tightly at spear point, the pale, shivering pigman limped back into the inner courtyard, bowing low before the sitting human lord. "Sir, you requested my presence." Fang Hao handed the terrified pigman a hefty slab of roasted meat, cutting straight to the core of his master plan. "Is the Manhwa market strictly limited to orc tribes, or can outsiders trade there?" Bolton blinked in surprise, instantly realizing why his life had been spared. "Not exclusively, my lord," he replied, taking a cautious bite of the food. "Humans and dwarves used to be frequent traders, though a few years back, conflict shifted it to mostly intertribe orc commerce. But if you plan to go, you must present yourself as a human. Showing up with an undead host will cause immediate, violent resistance." Fang Hao nodded silently, his mind clicking into place. With only 24 hours left until his rookie protection shield dissolved entirely, he needed a massive influx of war coins to secure top-tier merchant blueprints before the lawless chaos erupted. Learning that weapons and food crops were the absolute highest demand commodities in the orc markets, Fang Hao fetched a standard iron sword and a newly crafted hardwood shield, handing them to Bolton. "Can gear like this sell for a premium?" Bolton examined the fine steel edge and the robust, reinforced grain of the shield, his small eyes widening. "Ordinary orcs are terrible blacksmiths. While single pieces won't break the bank, an organized merchant bringing a massive, bulk shipment of quality iron arms will command an extraordinary price." "Excellent," Fang Hao smiled. "You're going to be my official guide. Map the route, navigate the orc politics, and once the cargo sells, I'll grant you your freedom and pay you a generous consultancy fee." Trapped and terrified, Bolton could only nod submissively. Once Bolton was escorted outside the towering perimeter walls to wait, Fang Hao pulled out his master ledger. It was time to break the economy. He opened the crafting tab, queued up a batch of 10 iron swords, and executed the command. System crafting complete. Hundredfold amplification triggered. 1010 iron swords materialized. A massive, gleaming mountain of steel clattered into the central square. Fang Hao's tireless skeletons immediately began packing the blades into the 5 seized merchant wagons, hitching up the docile horses. Next, he strode over to the newly upgraded level 3 burial grounds to expend his massive hoard of 1,700 captured orc spines. System recruitment initialized. Hundredfold amplification triggered. 10,100 skeleton soldiers mobilized. 2,200 skeleton spearmen mobilized. The sky darkened as a terrifying, earth-shaking legion of over 30,000 fully armed undead shock troops rose from the dust, locking their shields and pikes in flawless military synchronization. When the fortress gates rolled back, Bolton nearly fainted. Just an hour ago, the village courtyard was practically empty. Now, a sprawling, endless sea of skeletal death stood waiting. "Get in the carriage, Bolton, lead the way," Fang Hao called out, casually lounging in the lead wagon. Bolton climbed aboard, his hands trembling violently. My lord, deploying an army of this magnitude to escort 5 simple supply wagons will trigger massive, widespread panic across the entire region. Small tribes only have a few hundred warriors." "Let them panic," Fang Hao replied indifferently. "Move out." As the colossal undead juggernaut marched west, a different storm was brewing to the east inside the grand hall of the Fireblade tribe. The cowardly kobold chieftain, the sole survivor of the previous night's massacre, who had escaped execution by literal immersion in the camp's waste pit, lay groveling on the stone floor, shaking uncontrollably. Sitting upon a massive throne before him was Kent, the chieftain of the Fireblade tribe. Kent was a colossal, heavily scarred orc covered in dark red tribal tattoos, his eyes burning with absolute malice. "You are Tell. Lingmi Kedor is dead," Kent's voice boomed like thunder. "Why, yes, great chieftain," the kobold squeaked, pressing his face into the dirt. "The evil human lord unleashed a bottomless sea of undead. Lord Kedor was brutally slaughtered and his entire detachment was wiped out." Boom! Kent's fist crashed downward, instantly pulverizing a solid stone table into flying shrapnel. The alpha orc towered over the shivering scout, his white beard bristling with murderous fury. "If my most favored son and 2,000 elite warriors are dead, Why are you still breathing? Groveling in the dirt, the kobold chieftain quickly realized that telling the raw truth, that he had saved his own skin by hiding in a pile of camp refuse, would get him instantly executed. Desperate, he spun a desperate lie tailored to an alpha's pride. It was Lord Keto who ordered me to hide, great chieftain. He said I was small and easily overlooked. He commanded me to survive so I could bring you his final message and ensure his death is avenged. Kent closed his bloodshot eyes, leaning heavily into his throne as his massive chest heaved with grief. What were my son's final words? He said you are a legendary father, a supreme warrior, and that you would tear his killers apart. The kobold shrieked, playing his part perfectly. A heavy, predatory sigh escaped Kent's throat. Fine, tell me everything about this undead stronghold. The kobold eagerly blabbed every detail regarding Fang Hao's base, prompting Kent to bark an immediate order to his inner circle. Map the coordinates of this village, send our advanced scouts to verify the perimeter. Turning back to the shivering informant, Kent sneered, your cowardice cost me my favorite heir and 2,000 elite troops. I will spare your life for the intel, but you will pay in blood. Guards, drag him out and whip him. As the screaming kobold was hauled away to the sound of cracking leather, Kent yelled to the executioner, keep him breathing. He still has a part to play. Meanwhile, miles to the west, Bolton proved to be an invaluable guide. Using his intimate knowledge of the terrain, he routed the caravan through a hidden valley, bypassing several dangerous beast dens that a flat map would have completely ignored. Floating above the clouds via divine descent inside his Tier 3 skeleton giant bat, Fang Hao peered down at the landscape. A sweeping gray outline emerged on the horizon, the bustling hub of the Manhwa orc market. Snapping back into his human flesh, he called out to his guide, Bolton, we're closing in. Bolton turned his massive snout around from the lead wagon. Yes, my lord, but your army cannot get any closer. A host of 30,000 undead will trigger an absolute war footing. Even under the peace treaty, the guards will assume an invasion is underway. Fang Hao nodded, calculating the risk. Agreed. The Legion will halt here and fortify a perimeter camp. You and I will take the wagons in alone. Secure in the knowledge that he kept a directional teleportation scroll tucked into his tunic for an instant emergency escape, Fang Hao watched his mechanical army smoothly lock into a defensive ring around their backup supplies. 20 minutes later, the 5 horse-drawn wagons arrived at the gates of Manhwa. The weathered gray brick walls were choked with wild weeds, guarded by 2 massive, heavily muscled minotaurs resting their hands on giant battle axes. This sector is directly governed by the Minotaur tribe, Bolton whispered nervously to Fang Hao. Their warlord is a Tier 5 hero named Tyrok. No one dares to break the peace rules here. Do not provoke them. Bolton, one of the Tauren guards, grunted, stepping forward to inspect the payload. Back to trade your pelts. Bolton forced a wide, subservient smile, gesturing to the passenger seat. This time I am guiding a foreign merchant, my friend. He brings quality cargo and absolute goodwill. The 2 minotaurs shifted their enormous eyes toward Fang Hao, their jaws dropping slightly. A human? It has been winters since a human caravan stepped foot inside Manhwa. Exactly why he needed my navigation, Bolton chuckled nervously. The guards skimmed the covered wagons before tossing Bolton a heavy wooden token. Teach the boy our laws. If he starts a brawl inside the walls, Tyrok will have his head. Stepping past the threshold, the sheer novelty of a human walking through the orc city drew immediate, intense scrutiny. A growing crowd of curious, heavily armed demi-humans began tailing the 5 wagons, eager to see what an outsider was bringing to their market. By the time Bolton pulled the horses into an open merchant stall, a massive audience had choked the lane. Fang Hao stepped up and violently ripped the heavy tarpaulins away, exposing 5 full wagons packed to the brims with over 1,000 gleaming, perfectly balanced steel blades. Bolton inflated his chest and began roaring to the crowd at the top of his lungs. Gather round. Warriors of the continent, premium steel weapons forged by human hands. Step up and secure your blades. We accept pure war coins, rare blueprints, or exotic materials. Come and look. The crowd erupted as Bolton continued to bark his wares. An iron weapon for just a single war coin was an absolute steal. While some orcs tried to haggle, claiming the price was steep for standard infantry blades, Bolton stood firm on the universal market rate. The dam broke instantly. One massive orc stepped up, slammed down a leather pouch containing 100 crisp war coins, and hauled away 100 swords. The box behind Fang Hao filled rapidly with universal currency. In less than 30 minutes, they cleared over 300 blades. Then came the bartering. One orc traded a level 1 arrow tower blueprint for 10 swords and paid cash for 40 more. Another exchanged a hide boots crafting blueprint for 5 swords. Fang Hao purposely valued the white tier blueprints slightly higher than the traveling skeleton merchants' rates, a deliberate tactic to encourage the orcs to bleed their hidden reserves of rare schematics. When a tribal warrior offered up exceptionally rare materials, a magic essence and a trace of the spring, Fang Hao locked them down at 5 swords apiece. Thud! The heavy sound of a body hitting the dirt shattered the rhythm of the trading lane. "How many blades for this one?" a scarred orc snarled, resting his hand on a wicked scimitar. Fang Hao looked down. Curled at his feet was a young, trembling girl clad in rough linen. She possessed a slender, human-like figure, but atop her head sat a pair of long, soft rabbit ears, and a fluffy white tail twitched against her rump. She was a beastman of the rabbit tribe. Because the brutal, martial aesthetic of the orc kingdom favored raw muscle, the physically delicate beastmen were treated as worthless outliers. However, wealthy human nobles in the distant city-states paid exorbitant sums for their striking beauty, making them highly sought-after luxury slaves. "You want to trade her?" Fang Hao asked, his eyes narrowing. 100 iron swords and the rabbit is yours," the orc demanded arrogantly. "She just came of age, untouched." Fang Hao knew the market value was wildly inflated. Relying on basic haggling instincts, he cut the price clean in half. 50, she's a burden to transport. 90, the orc countered, his eyes darting greedily toward the wagons. 50. Don't play games, human. 60, or I sell her to the border scouts myself, the warrior spat, naming his true bottom line. Deal. Fang Hao nodded. The orc laughed boisterously, pocketing the 60 iron blades and shoving the terrified girl toward the counter along with her official parchment slave certificate. The bunny girl stumbled, standing at a striking 1.7 meters with long, flawless legs and an incredibly ample figure that stood in sharp contrast to her pale, tear-stained face. She bit her lip raw, trying to suppress her sobbing. Fang Hao looked at the weeping girl, softening his tone to sound like a reassuring peer rather than a tyrant. "All right, breathe, stop crying. What's your name? Do you know how to count?" "Master," she whispered, wiping her eyes with a trembling hand. "My name is Year. I can count very well." "Perfect," Fang Hao smiled gently, handing her the ledger. "Year, you're officially on the payroll. Help me manage the crate and hand out the blades to the customers." Fang Hao and his new bunny girl slave, Year, quickly established a smooth rhythm. While he handled the transactions, Year skillfully bound the iron swords with hemp rope for the eager customers. Within 3 hours, the stock was entirely sold out. In place of the weapons, the cart was loaded with boxes of universal war coins and unique resources. Fang Hao tallied the massive haul: 742 war coins, blueprints for an arrow tower, a bounty statue, hide boots, longbows, and iron arrows, alongside 12 natural gems, 3 magic essences, and several rare planar elements. He smiled in satisfaction. Leaving his isolated mountains was truly the path to prosperity. Mass-produced low-tier gear could yield incredible profits when sold in massive quantities. With the market wrapped up, Fang Hao honored his agreement with his pigman guide, tossing Bolton a bag of 50 war coins. Overjoyed to have his losses recouped and desperate to get away from a terrifying human who controlled an undead army, Bolton bid a respectful farewell. Fang Hao snapped the reins, preparing to leave the city and reunite with his hidden forces, when a heavy phalanx of Minotaur guards suddenly blocked his path. Their commander delivered a crisp message. The city's chieftain requested his presence at the Grand Hall immediately. Assured that his heavy cargo would be kept entirely safe under strict tribal protection laws, a curious Fang Hao agreed and followed them deep into the bustling stone city. Entering the tribal palace, he met the ruler of Manhwa, a Maz. Sive 2.5-meter-tall colossus with bronze skin and a rippling, powerful chest. This was Tyrok, a purple Tier 5 hero. Tyrok evaluated the lean human before letting out a friendly, booming laugh. Holding up one of the iron swords Fang Hao had just sold, the chieftain asked if his territory had a massive guild of blacksmiths to achieve such identical craftsmanship. Keeping the secret of his lord's book safe, Fang Hao vaguely confirmed they could mass-produce gear. Straight to the point, Tyrok placed a bulk order of 3,000 heavy battle axes, paying 8 war coins per piece. When Fang Hao admitted he lacked a weapon blueprint scaled to a minotaur size, Tyrok laughed and handed over a green quality adds battle axe blueprint as an advance payment. "How many days to deliver?" Tyrok asked. 3 days, Fang Hao replied confidently. Tyrok stared at him in absolute shock, wondering just how many workers this human commanded to promise 3,000 heavy weapons in 72 hours. Locking in the deal, Fang Hao left the palace, climbed back onto the cart where Yer was waiting safely, and steered the horses out of the city gates. It was time to start the forge. Fang Hao maintained a gentle, casual conversation as they trotted along, listening to Yer explain how her village had been pillaged, leaving her entirely alone in the world. When Fang Hao softly shared that he too was completely on his own, the raw vulnerability touched something deep within the fragile girl. System: the loyalty of the rabbit woman Yer has increased by 5 points, currently at 75. Blinking at the unexpected notification, Fang Hao checked her attributes. Though only Tier 1, Yer possessed unique racial traits like agility and vigilant, alongside a highly valuable head chef skill capable of boosting troop morale through cooking. Her tactical value was immediately proven when her snow-white rabbit ears suddenly twitched with violent intensity. "Master, a group of people is approaching rapidly from the left woods," she gasped, her eyes wide with horror. Fang Hao couldn't hear a thing over the carriage wheels, but trusting her vigilant danger sense, he wasted no time. "Watch me," he ordered, instantly slumping forward into her arms as he executed divine descent. Flapping into the sky inside a Tier 3 skeleton giant bat, his aerial view confirmed the threat. Over 20 heavily armed, greedy orc raiders were sprinting through the thickets to ambush them. They clearly viewed Fang Hao as a lone, wealthy fat sheep. Snapping back to his physical form, Fang Hao took the reins and deliberately steered the horses off the main road, diving directly into a secluded mountain valley. The pursuing orcs broke cover, howling in triumph as they surrounded the cornered carriage. "The rules of Manhwa forbid plundering," Fang Hao stated with eerie calmness, looking at the fierce faces. "Are you truly willing to break the peace?" "Ha, as long as we slaughter you here, who will ever know?" The lead orc sneered, his eyes locked hungrily onto the heavy coin boxes. The raiders laughed boisterously, mocking the human idiot for driving straight into a dead-end valley, a perfect, secluded graveyard. They began crudely debating recipes, joking about boiling him into a broth and throwing away his brains. Beside him, Yer trembled violently, weeping at her terrible luck. "Master, what do we do?" Fang Hao merely smiled, casting a cold gaze over the bloodthirsty thieves. "Don't worry, Yer, they're just delivering a few extra offerings." The orc's laughter died instantly, replaced by absolute rage at his casual arrogance. "Kid, you're asking for a slow death. Kill him and split the gold," the leader roared. The bandit surged forward, weapons raised, only to freeze mid-stride. Click, click, click. A deafening, synchronized grinding of ancient bones echoed from every ridge, ravine, and shadow of the valley. Before the terrified orcs could even process the sound, a suffocating, endless wall of over 30,000 fully armored undead skeletons emerged from the brush, locking their iron spears and shields into a flawless, inescapable ring of death. The ambush was a complete disaster for the raiders. Surrounded by an endless sea of bone, the 20-odd orcs huddled together in absolute terror as the skeletal perimeter ruthlessly tightened. Realizing the massive undead vanguard was actively protecting the human driver, the lead orc roared, "Boy, who exactly are you?" Fang Hao offered a thin, mocking smile. "It doesn't matter. Have you decided how you want to prepare my broth yet? Actually, my brains are quite remarkable. I promise eating them won't make you stupid." Desperate and drowning in panic, the bandits abandoned all talk of a recipe. "Charge, break their line," the leader shrieked, but Fang Hao was entirely done playing games. "Kill them all," he commanded flatly. The unholy tide crashed over the raiders, executing the entire group in less than 5 minutes. Fang Hao calmly ordered the battlefield scrubbed, throwing the corpses into the conversion field to harvest 8 writhing spines, 43 war coins, and a stockpile of raw orc weapons. As the tens of thousands of marching skeletons resumed their journey back to the base, Yer sat silently in the wagon bed, paralyzed with fear. She began to suspect her handsome master was actually an ancient lich disguised in human flesh, plotting to harvest her soul and turn her into a hollow servant. System notice: the loyalty of the rabbit woman Yer has decreased by 5 points. Current loyalty is 70. Noticing the abrupt dip in her devotion, Fang Hao tossed over a bag of jerky to comfort her. "Are you hungry? Don't worry, I am no cruel slave trader. I won't make your life difficult." Yer nibbled on the meat, her large, moist eyes locked onto his distinct, handsome features. "Master, are you going to turn me into a skeleton too?" she whimpered, suddenly kneeling and bowing her head so deeply that her loose linen garments parted, revealing her pale, delicate skin. "Please don't. Yer will be perfectly obedient and serve you forever." Fang Hao coughed lightly, quickly looking away from the distracting view. Get up. Why on earth would I turn you into a skeleton? No one in this territory will ever harm you. You are free to live a carefree life here and do exactly what you love. A wave of profound relief washed over the girl, her tightly furrowed brows melting into a brilliant, captivating smile. System notice: the loyalty of the rabbit woman year has increased by 10 points. Current loyalty is 80. As Fang Hao rested in the back of the cart, he opened the global chat. The regional channel was in absolute hysterics. A nearby human lord had spotted his 30,000-strong legion marching past their border and frantically asked if the Book of Lords had a camera feature to record the ghostly army. Other players cracked jokes about kneeling down to show respect, while some offered fake Taoist divinations for protection. Fang Hao peeked over the wagon's edge, spotting a poorly fortified, wooden-fenced village huddled behind a glowing protective shield in the distance, before turning back to his screen. By twilight, the massive procession finally breached his towering fortress gates. Year stared in absolute awe at the sprawling, mechanical operations of the base, thousands of skeletons seamlessly patrolling, farming, and hauling stone bricks. Move the war coin crates safely into my cabin hall, Fang Hao instructed the soldiers before turning to his new assistant. Year, fetch some meat from the warehouse and prepare dinner for the two of us. The rest of the population doesn't require food. Right away, master, she cheered, eagerly setting up the hearth. While the aroma of cooking meat filled the courtyard, Fang Hao cracked open his freshly acquired blueprints to enhance his security grid before the final day of player immunity elapsed. System: Level 1 Arrow Tower Blueprint selected. Description: a vital defensive structure designed to observe hostile movements early and rain down automated ranged projectiles on any target entering its domain. The strategic placement for the arrow towers was clear: the four corners of his towering city walls. Because his level 3 territory was roughly the size of a large village, 4 nodes were perfectly adequate to cover the entire perimeter. Fang Hao initialized construction, watching twin beams of light solidifying into 5-meter-tall fortifications featuring reinforced stone bases and elevated wooden firing platforms. Without hesitation, he funneled his massive lumber and stone reserves into the ledger, aggressively upgrading all 4 outposts from level 1 straight to level 3. The structures surged upward, topping out at an imposing 7 meters tall and unlocking a capacity of 4 watchmen per tower. Lacking trained archers, Fang Hao mechanically reassigned 16 patrolling skeleton soldiers to light crossbow duty, sending them to the armory to swap weapons. While they marched, he used his newly won trade blueprints to forge premium ammunition. He queued a batch of 10 iron arrows, instantly triggering his amplification. System: crafting complete, hundredfold amplification triggered, 1010 iron arrows materialized. The newly designated skeletal marksmen gathered the heavy bundles of steel-tipped bolts and climbed the towers in teams of 4, establishing an automated, lethal crossfire network. Scanning the remaining schematics, a blue-quality entry immediately caught his eye. Idol of the God of Harvest, blue quality. Category: Special Building. Required materials: wood 320, stone 1200, natural gems 5, magic essence 2, traces of earth 3, traces of forest 3. Effect: total territory planting and resource harvesting yield plus 10%. Fang Hao gasped. He had completely overlooked the item amidst the chaos of the orc market, but this passive yield multiplier was equivalent to a top-tier L. Legendary artifact. Suppressing his excitement, he selected the absolute epicenter of his village and authorized the build. For 5 minutes, a rich blue aura swirled in the square, slowly manifesting a stunning 3-meter-high sculpture of a crowned goddess bestowing a gentle blessing across his land. With his walls towering, crossfires set, and the goddess statue humming with economic power, Fang Hao took a deep, steadying breath. His anxiety vanished. Even with the protection shield dropping tomorrow, his 30,000-strong bone legion transformed any potential invasion into a massive harvesting opportunity. For the undead faction, war was an endless, snowballing source of nourishment. Master, dinner is served, Year called out softly. The fragrant aroma of seasoned vegetable soup and perfectly seared pork chops instantly broke his tactical trance. Sitting at the wooden table, Fang Hao took a bite, thoroughly impressed by her head chef culinary prowess. It tasted vastly superior to his own crude cooking. Looking up, he noticed Year standing rigidly to the side, staring longingly at the pot and constantly swallowing her saliva. "What are you standing there for? Sit down and eat," Fang Hao urged. "Oh, I am not hungry, master," she whispered, looking down. A slave must wait until the master finishes his meal. We don't do those backward rules here, Fang Hao insisted, waving her over. Sit, you need energy to work. Hesitant and terrified of overstepping, the bunny girl cautiously slipped onto the bench like a scolded child, ladling a small bowl of soup while stealing nervous glances at him. Leaning back, Fang Hao opened the regional chat to check the public sentiment. The scrolling text was a chaotic mess of anxiety and toxic jealousy. Oh no, Boss Fang Hao didn't list any food at noon or tonight. Did the big shot finally bite the dust out there? Yeah, I just built my barracks and I'm starving. I need his food trades to recruit troops. I hope he didn't get slaughtered. Why does everyone constantly pray for Fang Hao to die? It's been 6 days and your mouths are still pure poison. Can't you wish the man well? Look at the fanboy getting defensive. Fang Hao's loyal son is ready to bite anyone who speaks the truth. HMPH, that arrogant bastard Fang Hao thinks he owns the region. If the wilderness monsters don't gut him tonight, I'll personally slaughter him the moment our shields drop tomorrow. Fang Hao watched the vitriol scroll past, a cold, predatory smile playing on his lips as he chewed his pork chop. Let them talk, let them scheme, and let them march. When the shields vanished tomorrow, his 30,000-man skeletal tide would be waiting to welcome them to the new world. The toxic back-and-forth escalated until a sudden, chime-like hum echoed directly into the minds of every transmigrated lord across the continent. System notice, congratulations on surviving the integration period. Time remaining for Rookie Sanctuary immunity 10 hours. Post-shield event, blood boiling. Upon expiration, the rookie shields will permanently dissolve. All localized wildlife and wilderness beasts will enter a bloodthirsty state, granting them a plus 30% bonus to all core attributes for 24 hours. They will immediately launch a coordinated assault against every surviving lord's territory. Good luck. As the global text finished scrolling, a sharp, localized crimson alert flashed exclusively in Fang Hao's vision. System notice, rookie trial parameters altered. Reason, extreme faction hostility generated by player actions. Status, original Beastwave defense trial cancelled. New main objective, the conquest of the Fireblade tribe. You have executed Kedor, the youngest son of Chieftain Kent. In retaliation, the Fireblade clan has mobilized a grand war host of 30,000 veteran orc warriors to completely dismantle your territory and exterminate your faction. Fang Hao's brow furrowed tightly as he closed the prompt. While the rest of humanity prepared to hold the line against crazed forest wolves and wild boars, his rookie trial had scaled into a full-scale regional war against a martial empire. 30,000 bloodthirsty orc shock troops was an astronomical number for any standard player. 30,000, Fang Hao muttered, a calculating gleam returning to his eyes. He had expected the Fireblade chieftain to discover the slaughter eventually, but the system pinning it directly to his rookie survival trial was a chaotic twist. Yet, as he looked out across his sprawling, stone-reinforced courtyard, his initial shock melted into cold confidence. He still held 372 unspent wriggling spines in his master vault, and his active garrison already boasted a terrifying, synchronized legion of over 30,000 fully armed undead footmen and pikemen. If Kent wanted a war of attrition, Fang Hao's tireless, emotionless army could grind 30,000 flesh-and-blood warriors into dust without break-in. Gee, a sweat. For the immortal faction, 30,000 elite bodies weren't a threat. They were just a massive, unsolicited delivery of raw materials to his skull conversion field. He glanced back at the regional chat. The entire channel had completely descended into absolute panic over the impending blood-boiling wildlife wave, entirely forgetting their petty business arguments. A 30% attribute buff to the wild beasts. I struggle to kill a normal prairie wolf with a trap. This event is going to completely wipe us out. Urgently buying city wall blueprints, paying top dollar. If anyone has a spare schematic, name your price right now. Forget a city wall, nobody has the thousands of stones needed to build that in 10 hours. Does anyone have a basic wooden fence blueprint? I'll trade raw iron for it. Desperately buying weapons and defense gear. I'm still using a brittle bone spear, please. Wait, remember that post from yesterday? The guy who cleared the river monsters said he traded his hardwood shield blueprint to Fang Hao for top-tier weapons. He mentioned receiving solid iron spears. Holy crap, it's true, Boss Fang Hao isn't just selling basic axes, he already has iron spears and heavy hardwood shields in his ledger. The frantic chatter surged as desperate players finally realized who held the keys to their survival. Fang Hao calmly set down his wooden bowl of vegetable soup, cracked open his crafting menu, and prepared to supply the region at a premium. The false sense of security provided by the newbie shield had shattered. For 6 days, most lords believed they could develop at a leisurely, peaceful pace as long as their small militias were fed. But the sudden 10-hour countdown and the impending blood-boiling beast horde completely threw them into reality. In a flash, the toxic arguments vanished. The regional chat completely flipped as terrified players begged Fang Hao for gear. Survival trumped pride, and the ultimate equalizer in a monster ambush was a proper weapon. Fang Hao seized the moment to clean out his armory. He listed a massive bulk lot of 142 miscellaneous weapons, consisting of scavenged orc blades, rusty castle zombie spears, and worn gear stripped from his own upgraded skeletons, alongside 4 212 phased-out basic wooden shields. He aggressively leveraged his market monopoly, setting steep resource costs for every single piece. Yet the desperate players bought them instantly, throwing their entire reserves of timber, stone, iron, and exotic elements at the storehouse listings. The vocal trolls who had insulted him minutes prior suddenly found themselves locked behind a harsh trading ban. They flooded the chat crying foul, begging for forgiveness and calling him their father, but Fang Hao kept the blacklist firmly locked. Between the desperate cash sales, players began bartering unrecorded blueprints to survive. Wooden cup blueprint white traded for a single iron spear. Fang Hao figured a structured water container schematic was worth the minor cost. Lattice wooden window blueprint white and animal hide trousers blueprint white. Alarm bell blueprint green quality, a major defensive acquisition. By the time the storehouse inventory was entirely liquidated, Fang Hao's vaults were bursting with premium copper ore, saltpeter, natural gems, and planar essences. As the channel fell into a focused silence while players frantically fortified their camps, Year cleared their dinner plates. Fang Hao sat down, opened his ledger, and clicked the newly acquired wooden cup schematic to test it. System hundredfold amplification triggered, 101 wooden cups materialized. A massive, cascading pile of carved wooden cups erupted out of thin air, clattering across the dining table. Year shrieked in surprise, lunging forward to catch the stray cups before they hit the floor. She stared at the manifestation with wide, breathless eyes. "My unique abilities are strictly confidential," Fang Hao stated calmly. "Keep it inside these walls." "I swear it, Master, my lips are entirely sealed," she promised, her long rabbit ears pinning flat in reverence. "Keep a pair for our table and haul the rest to the warehouse," Fang Hao smiled, standing up. With only hours left on the global clock, he immediately initialized his final structural defense asset. Alarm bell green quality. Required materials: wood 200, iron 50, copper 10, hemp rope 5. He authorized the build, positioning the heavy metal bell directly adjacent to his watchtower matrix. The defense network was armed, the ammunition was stacked, and his 30,000-strong bone legion stood waiting. Let the Fireblade Empire march. Fang Hao was ready to paint his valley red. The copper ore bartered from the orc market proved essential, allowing Fang Hao to craft the alarm bells he needed for his defenses. A hundredfold amplification instantly transformed his humble materials into 101 iron-green bronze bells. He ordered his ski letons to mount 4 onto the arrow towers. Striking the bell with its internal striker, a piercing, resonant chime rang out, so deafening it sent birds scattering from the distant forest. His warning grid was officially operational. With the Fireblade Orc army marching toward his territory, Fang Hao halted all exterior construction. Instead, he turned his focus to military mobilization. At the Skull Conversion Field, he bypassed the Tier 1 infantry and mass-recruited 300 skeleton giant bats. His amplification triggered, manifesting 30,300 aerial units that instantly darkened the sky, roosting on the valley ridges to await his command. Next, he utilized his vast store of wriggling spines at the burial grounds. In a flurry of light, he recruited over 50,000 skeleton soldiers and 57,000 spearmen. An army of over 100,000 undead stood motionless in the courtyard, stacked like a pyramid. Fang Hao spent the next few hours meticulously equipping this massive force with broadswords, shields, iron pikes, and reinforced leather armor. During the mobilization, he found his bunny girl slave, Year, hiding in the cabin. Terrified by the sight of the unholy legion, she was trembling. Fang Hao gently called her over to gift her a new pair of animal hide boots. As she took off her worn, scavenged rags and stepped into the sturdy, fitted boots, her fear subsided, replaced by a radiant, grateful smile. With the sky darkening, Fang Hao turned his attention to her living quarters. He assigned her the only remaining bedroom in his level 3 lord's cabin. Yer gasped in disbelief as she entered. The room was outfitted with plush animal skin rugs, flowing silk curtains, and exquisitely carved wardrobes looted from the fortress. After quickly crafting a single bed frame and installing new lattice wooden windows to keep her comfortable, Fang Hao bid her goodnight, promising her safety and freedom within his territory. As he retreated to his own quarters, a system notification chimed in his mind. The loyalty of the rabbitwoman Yer has increased by 10 points. Current loyalty is 90. With his defenses locked and his legion of 100,000 ready for war, Fang Hao prepared for the coming dawn. The battlefield was set for total carnage. While the Fireblade orcs believed they were marching against 5,000 basic skeletons, Fang Hao's defensive grid had secretly mutated into a fortress holding 100,000 elite undead. As Chief Kent gave the arrogant command to charge, the global countdown hit absolute zero. The iridescent beginner's sanctuary shield dissolved like a bursting bubble, and the true trial officially commenced. The orcs launched a classic, terrifying vanguard assault. Relying on their massive speed advantage, 3,000 heavy dire wolf riders broke formation, roaring with primal bloodlust as they sprinted across the rocky terrain toward the outer gates. Crossbowmen rained fire, Fang Hao ordered from the ramparts. A volley of 1,000 steel-tipped iron bolts hissed through the air from the high catwalks, tearing into the front lines of the cavalry. Wolves collapsed, throwing their armored riders into the dirt, but the momentum of the charging pack was too vast to halt. They closed the gap within seconds. Fang Hao didn't want to manage this frontline chaos from a remote distance. He needed direct tactical dominance. Yer, he called out, his voice sharp and steady. The trembling rabbit girl, clad in her fresh leather armor, rushed to his side. Master, what do we do? Hold me up, keep my physical body safe from the tremors, Fang Hao commanded, sitting flat against the stone floorboards. Before she could gasp, his human eyes rolled back and his consciousness violently plummeted downward into the front ranks below the gate. System notice, divine descent initialized. Target frontline skeleton spearmen. Compatibility 75%. Opening his hollow, glowing blue eyes inside a pristine skeletal chassis, Fang Hao gripped his iron pike, his voice amplified by magical energy across the entire defensive line. Spearmen, lock shields, step forward 2 paces and set your pikes. Prepare to receive the charge. With flawless, terrifying precision, 58,000 skeleton spearmen slammed their massive hardwood shields together, angling their long iron pikes upward into a solid, unyielding wall of razor-sharp steel. Because of their anti-corrosion racial trait, they stood like stone monuments, completely ignoring the crushing charge bonuses of the oncoming cavalry. The dire wolf riders slammed into the spear wall at maximum velocity, and the slaughter truly began. The dire wolf riders slowed down to avoid the thrusting spears, but another volley of arrows rained down, leaving them in pain. The dark mass of orc infantry charged forward regardless. From 400 meters away, orc spearmen hurled short spears into the skeleton ranks. Fang Hao deactivated his possession, rose from Yer's embrace, and immediately shifted his consciousness into a giant skeleton bat. A dark cloud of 30,000 aerial skeletons emerged from the forest, swooping down into the orc ranks like cannonballs. "Watch out for those bats, speed up the attack," Chief Kent shouted. Returning to his body, Fang Hao observed the overall battle like a computer strategy game. The orc army was now just 300 meters from the walls. "It's time to close the net," he muttered, collapsing back into Yer's arms. Yer held him anxiously. She knew the orcs' cruelty and feared the city walls wouldn't hold. Suddenly, the battlefield shifted. A massive skeleton legion emerged from the orcs' rear and flanks, launching a well-organized flanking maneuver. Giant bats dragged orc soldiers into the air, tearing them apart. Surrounded by an endless ocean of undead, the orcs' morale plummeted. Chief Kent stood atop his war chariot, his face grim. He wielded a long blade, each swing unleashing crimson flames that shattered dozens of skeletons. Fang Hao recognized him as a Tier 3 hero. Kent broke through the encirclement, driving his chariot straight to the city walls. He swung his blade, sending a tangible crimson light that left a massive crack on the city gate. To prevent him from breaching the gate, Fang Hao used his flame ring to manifest a blazing fireball and hurled it from the wall. Sensing the intense heat, Kent swung his blade upward, detonating the fireball in a violent explosion. Simultaneously, 2,000 archers on the city wall targeted Kent. He deflected the arrows, but his dire wolves returned into porcupines and fell dead, pinning the chariot. By the time the wider battle ended, Fang Hao's army had completely wiped out the orc soldiers. Only 50,000 skeletons remained from his initial force. Now Chief Kent stood entirely alone. Surrounded by a sea of skeletons and deprived of his chariot, the orc chieftain fought fiercely for 30 minutes before letting out a final defiant roar and being completely swallowed by the tide of bone. The undead emerged victorious. Fang Hao and Yer drove the carriage away from the bustling stalls of the Manhwa market. To prevent widespread panic and avoid unnecessary friction with the local orc authorities, his massive skeletal vanguard had established their fortified encampment a secluded 20-minute march away from the city gates. As the wooden wheels rolled along the dirt path, Fang Hao noticed that Yer kept her head bowed low, her posture incredibly tense and cautious. Eager to break the silence and liven up his otherwise quiet domain, he asked how she had originally fallen into slavery. In a soft, trembling whisper, Yer explained that her peaceful village had been brutally raided, leaving her as the sole survivor before the traffickers bound her in chains. In the ruthless orc kingdom, everything was dictated by raw physical might. Weak demi-human strains like the rabbit people were viewed as currency rather than citizens. When she confirmed she had no living relatives left, Fang Hao offered a warm, reassuring smile, telling her that he was entirely alone in this world too, so they just had to keep looking forward together. The gentle vulnerability caught the fragile girl completely off guard. She raised her head, stealing a breathless look at her master before a bright system notification chimed directly in Fang Hao's vision, indicating her baseline loyalty had surged up 5 points to a secure 75. Before he could analyze her attribute sheet, Yer's snow-white rabbit ears suddenly twitched with violent intensity. Her face turned pale as she gasped, warning him that a large group of hostile entities was rapidly sprinting toward their position from the left thickets. Trusting her natural danger sense, Fang Hao instantly commanded her to hold his physical frame steady. His eyes rolled back into his head as he executed a long-range possession, his consciousness rocketing across the valley floor to inhabit the body of a roosting Tier 3 skeleton giant bat. Flying high into the clouds, his aerial view confirmed her warning. A greedy band of over 20 heavily armed orcs had tracked them from the market, planning to slaughter the lone human and plunder his heavy boxes of war coins in the secluded valley. Greed is a swift death warrant, Fang Hao muttered through the bat's jaws. Returning to his human body, he smoothly steered the horses right into the heart of the secluded ravine, setting the perfect trap as the screaming bandits broke cover to surround them. Fang Hao issued the looting order, and 30,000 skeleton soldiers dispersed across the Fireblade capital, stripping the settlement of every transportable asset. Leaving the infantry to clear the surrounding structures, Fang Hao marched directly toward the central chieftain's hall with 6 elite guards. He knew that in an orc tribe of this scale, the primary hall held the greatest concentration of hoarded treasure and high-GH quality chests. The spacious hall was constructed from heavy stone and timber. Fang Hao systematically ordered his units to tear down the large wall curtains and dismantle the iron antler chandeliers. While his skeletons hauled out the heavy furniture, Fang Hao tested Chief Kent's massive ironwood throne. Finding it far too large for a human frame, he shrugged and ordered it loaded onto a wagon anyway. Searching the master bedroom, Fang Hao spotted a gleaming gold treasure chest resting against the stone wall. He muttered a quick, superstitious prayer for good luck before popping the heavy lock. System gold chest unlocked. Obtained cavalry training camp blueprint, excellent single-edged sword blueprint, green quality, quarry blueprint, leather saddle blueprint, 320 war coins, and 35 beast fang stones. The haul was phenomenal. The crescent-shaped beast fang stones provided the rare materials required for advanced orc construction, while the green weapon and cavalry blueprints promised to permanently solve his army's mobility issues. After absorbing the schematics into his ledger, he walked out to inspect the rest of the settlement. Not far from the hall, a massive tribal ranch held over 300 domesticated unicorn sheep, peacefully grazing and completely indifferent to the walking dead. Fang Hao chuckled, remembering how he had once wasted over an hour chasing a single wild sheep in the mountains. He ordered his units to bind the animals safely and herd them into the convoy. After checking his master ledger, the total pillage from the Fireblade capital was staggering. 51,208 wood, 28,503 stone, 111,850 leather, 524 war coins, 95,520 units of raw meat, and 324 live sheep, alongside thousands of simple wooden beds and cabinets. Realizing his current detachment couldn't carry the massive mountain of supplies in a single trip, Fang Hao utilized his hundredfold amplification to forge 30,000 sturdy wooden transport carts. Securing the highest priority materials and the livestock first, he initiated the march back to his valley. As the sun began to dip, the heavily loaded convoy breached his home fortress gates. Yi ran out to greet him, her face filled with immense joy. Having realized the skeleton garrison wouldn't harm her, she had lost most of her initial terror, though her eyes widened to the size of saucers when she saw hundreds of sheep and wagons rolling into the courtyard. Fang Hao smiled, instructing her to pick out any fine curtains or furniture she wanted for her new bedroom. He then diverted the unicorn sheep into his pasture. Because the influx of animals immediately overcrowded the perimeter, he dumped his freshly won timber and stone into the building tab, upgrading his home ranch from level 1 straight to level 3. The structures expanded exponentially, easily accommodating the new herd. Leaving Yi to secure the core fortress, Fang Hao turned his carts around and led his tireless column back to the orc capital to clean out the remaining timber and furniture before nightfall. Lying in the bed of his cart on the return leg, he cracked open his Book of Lords to review the global chat. The Great Integration War was finally drawing to a close. The survivors were busy celebrating their hard-fought victories over the beast wave, listing massive quantities of surplus meat won from the slaughter. Suddenly, a frantic message flashing on the regional feed caught his eye. It was Zhang Bin, the nearby neighbor who had spent the last week accidentally catching Fang Hao's drowned skeleton laborers in his river nets. "Someone please save me, my walls are down and I can't hold on any longer. I am willing to trade my entire territory and every resource I own. Please, someone help me." The sweeping announcement from the Master System echoed across the continent, signaling that the brutal integration era had drawn to a definitive close. Across the frontier, the maddened forest predators lost their bloodthirsty status and immediately scattered back into the deep thickets. Inside his fortress, Fang Hao finally collapsed onto his wooden bench to enjoy the hot dinner Yi had prepared. He opened his master ledger to check the global channel, finding a massive list of regional rankings pinned to the main interface. The system chime rang in his ears once more, announcing the completion of the trial. Due to his absolute elimination of a 30,000-man veteran orc faction, Fang Hao had secured the uncontested first-place position across the entire continent. The rewards materialized instantly into his personal inventory, flashing with a brilliant purple aura. He received 5,000 Universal War Coins, a rare level 3 Town Hall upgrade scroll, a set of purple-tier hero recruitment contracts, and a specialized blueprint for an undead bone forge. Looking out over his courtyard, he felt a profound sense of relief. His 30,000-man skeletal vanguard had suffered massive attrition, but with Ninit. 1,000 fresh orc spines sitting in his vault and a massive mountain of pillaged timber and iron, he could rebuild his legion overnight. He looked over at Yi, who was happily organizing the fine silk drapes and carved mahogany wardrobes he had plundered from Chief Kent's master suite. Her long rabbit ears twitched with contentment as she swept the floorboards, completely adjusted to her new life in the castle. Fang Hao pulled out the newly acquired Undead Bone Forge schematic, adding it directly to his building list. The structure required a massive amount of stone and iron, but it promised to allow his skeletons to smelt high-tier alloy armaments directly from the remains of fallen monsters. With his rookie immunity completely gone, the world was now an open sandbox of lawless factions and competing human lords. But as Fang Hao looked at his newly upgraded level 3 walls and the silent, automated arrow towers guarding the pass, he knew his valley was no longer a target. It was a fortress. The world announcement chimed 3 times in a row across the continent, solidifying Fang Hao's position as the absolute number 1 lord globally. Private messages and regional chat rooms exploded with awe and praise from players who had survived the night thanks to his traded gear. After finishing his dinner, Fang Hao excitedly reviewed his high-tier rewards. He held a faction hero recruitment scroll, which would finally grant him a legendary leader capable of matching the devastating raw power he had witnessed from the Minotaur and Orc chieftains. Next was an orange-tier special building blueprint for a wishing well. It promised weekly resource-based rewards, though the material checklist was astronomically steep, requiring 3 additional hidden statues alongside his current goddess of fertility monument. Lastly, he unlocked a blue-tier dwarf musket crafting blueprint, an invaluable trigger-activated firearm that would easily bypass the rigid, clumsy coordination limitations of his basic skeleton infantry. Yer walked over, kneeling quietly to offer a wooden bowl of freshly washed, crystal-clear red fruits. Fang Hao gently told her to stand up, reminding her that she no longer needed to constantly bow and kneel within his territory. He handed one of the juicy fruits back to her, noting that with hundreds of baskets plundered from the orcs, the two of them needed to eat them before they spoiled. Yer took a sweet bite, her face melting into a satisfied smile as she thanked her master. Eager to summon his first champion, Fang Hao stepped out of the cabin into the bright moonlight. He clutched the parchment tightly, praying for a powerful, high-tier general who could lead his legions so he could finally relax as a laid-back lord. He took a deep breath and officially authorized the activation. The scroll dissolved into a brilliant, burning aura, casting a massive, intricate magic circle across the courtyard floor. A blinding orange pillar of light erupted from the stones, cutting through the darkness. "Holy crap, the golden legend," Fang Hao yelled, shielding his eyes. As the column of light slowly faded, a tall, gaunt, and ancient silhouette emerged from the glowing seal. Successfully recruited Lick Nelson, Orange Tier 7 hero.